The most feared man in the Russo family did not scream when bullets tore through his car, and he did not beg when surgeons told him his right leg might never obey him again. Gabriel Russo had survived knives in back alleys, police raids at dawn, and family men who smiled at his table while planning his funeral. But nothing filled his mansion with more danger than the quiet sound of a woman's shoes crossing the marble floor with a therapy bag in her hand. Mila Hart arrived on a rainy Monday morning with soft curls pinned at the back of her neck, a plain navy coat buttoned over her full body, and calm eyes that did not drop to the floor when armed men opened the door. She did not look like the kind of woman Gabriel's world respected. She was not polished like the women at charity galas. She was not sharp and glittering like the fiancée, who sat beside his bed and touched his hand only when other people were watching. Mila was warm, steady, and visibly plus-size, the kind of woman most people made the mistake of underestimating before they ever heard her speak. That mistake was the reason Gabriel Russo was still breathing by the end of the week. The Russo mansion stood at the edge of the Hudson like a warning carved from stone. High black gates guarded a long driveway lined with winter trees, their bare branches scratching at the pale sky. Security cameras watched from every corner. Men in dark coats moved across the property with earpieces in place and hands close to their weapons. Inside, the house was warmer but not softer. The halls smelled of old wood, expensive coffee, leather, and something medicinal that no one wanted to name. Every room felt too large, too quiet, too careful, as if the walls themselves knew their master had been wounded and did not dare breathe too loudly. Mila had worked with soldiers, accident survivors, stroke patients, stubborn old men, frightened teenagers, and wealthy patients who believed money could make pain optional. She had seen anger before. She had seen shame hiding beneath cruelty. But Gabriel Russo's anger had weight. It changed the air around him. When she entered his private recovery room, he sat near the tall window in a black wheelchair, dressed in a dark shirt and loose pants, his broad shoulders stiff with pride he could no longer fully carry. His left hand gripped the armrest like he wanted to crush it. His right leg rested in a brace. The sunlight touched his face and made him look almost carved, all hard lines, tired eyes, and a jaw set so tightly it must have hurt. He did not greet her. He looked at her once, from her shoes to her face, and his mouth curved without warmth. "This is who they sent me," he said, his voice low and rough from weeks of pain and sleepless nights. "I asked for the best therapist in the state, not someone who looks like she gets tired walking upstairs." The room went still. One of the men by the wall shifted as if he expected Mila to flinch. Another looked down. Mila had heard worse things in brighter rooms from people with kinder faces. Her cheeks warmed, but her voice did not shake. She set her bag on the side table, folded her coat over a chair, and looked directly at Gabriel. "My size is part of why I am good at my job," she said. "I have a stable base, strong hips, strong legs, and enough body strength to support a grown man who thinks rage is the same thing as balance. If you fall, I can catch you. If you fight the movement, I can keep you from hurting yourself. And if you insult me again, I will still do my job because I am a professional." Gabriel stared at her. For a moment, something moved behind his dark eyes, something almost like surprise. Then his expression hardened again. "You think you can handle me?" "No," Mila said gently. "I think you can learn how to handle yourself again. I am only here to make sure you do not ruin your body before it gets the chance to heal." A faint sound came from the doorway. Valentina stood there in a cream silk dress, her dark hair smooth as glass, her diamond earrings shining softly against her neck. She looked like a photograph in a luxury magazine, beautiful in a way that made people step aside without thinking. Her smile was sweet, but her eyes were not. She entered the room carrying a silver tray with a tall glass of pale green recovery shake on it. "Gabriel, darling," she said, gliding past Mila as if Mila were furniture. "You need your nutrition before therapy. Dr. Bellamy said the vitamins are important." Gabriel's gaze flickered to the glass. His mouth tightened. "Leave it." Valentina leaned down and kissed his cheek, careful not to touch the scar near his temple. "You must not be difficult today. Everyone is trying so hard to help you." Then she looked at Mila with soft cruelty hidden under perfect manners. "And you must be the new therapist. How brave of you to take this position. Gabriel can be very demanding." "I read his file," Mila said. Valentina's eyes slid over Mila's body slowly with the kind of delicate smile people used when they wanted their insult to sound like concern. "I hope the work will not be too much for you." Mila did not answer right away. She picked up her clipboard, checked Gabriel's range of motion notes, and said, "I was hired because I can do the work." Gabriel watched the exchange without speaking. Mila could feel his attention on her. Colder than touch, but just as real. Valentina placed the shake on the table beside him and rested her fingers on his shoulder. Gabriel's body stiffened beneath her hand. It was small, almost nothing. But Mila noticed it. She noticed everything. The way his breathing changed when Valentina came near. The way the men in the room looked at her with respect that felt rehearsed. The way the shake sat untouched, even though the glass already had faint condensation on its sides, meaning it had been prepared before Mila arrived. When Valentina left, the room seemed to loosen. Gabriel's eyes remained on the door long after she was gone. Mila washed her hands in the private sink, took out a blood pressure cuff, and began with the basics. "We are not standing today. I want to see how much movement you have without forcing anything. I am not a child." "No," Mila said. "Children usually listen better." One of the guards coughed into his fist. Gabriel cut him a look so sharp the man went silent. Mila moved closer and knelt beside the wheelchair. She kept her hands visible before touching him, giving him the dignity of warning. His file said incomplete spinal trauma, nerve inflammation, muscle wasting from weeks of bed rest, pain spikes, poor sleep, refusal to follow therapy orders. The file did not mention the deeper injury. It did not say that a man who once controlled rooms with a glance now hated needing help to shift his own weight. "May I touch your leg?" she asked. His jaw flexed. "Do whatever you came to do." "That is not consent," Mila said. "I asked if I may touch your leg." Gabriel looked down at her. He seemed annoyed, but not bored. "Fine." She began carefully, her hands firm and warm through the fabric as she checked muscle response. His thigh tightened under her fingers. Pain crossed his face, fast and hidden almost before it appeared. Mila softened her pressure. "There, that is where your body starts guarding." "My body is weak." "No," she said. "Your body is scared. There is a difference." His eyes snapped to hers. "My body does not get scared." "Then it is smarter than you are," she said, and before he could respond, she guided his ankle through a small controlled movement. The session was not dramatic. There was no miracle. Gabriel did not rise from the chair or move like the man his people remembered. He cursed under his breath. He refused an exercise. He almost shoved her hand away when the pain sharpened. But Mila did not retreat. She did not baby him, and she did not challenge him in a way that turned his pride into a weapon. She simply held steady, counting his breaths, adjusting his posture, reminding him when he locked his shoulders, telling him when to stop and when to try again. By the end, sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. His face was pale, but his eyes were alive with anger, and under that anger was something smaller, more dangerous to a man like him. "Hope. That is enough for today," Mila said. "I barely did anything. You did more than you did yesterday. You were not here yesterday." "Exactly." For the first time, Gabriel almost smiled. It was gone quickly, like a match struck in a storm, but Mila saw it. So did the guard by the door, who looked away before Gabriel could catch him. Valentina returned as Mila was packing her bag. The shake was still untouched. Her gaze dropped to the glass, then to Gabriel, and a tiny line appeared between her perfect brows. "You did not drink it. I was busy." "You need your strength," she said, lifting the glass and holding it out. Mila watched Gabriel take it. His fingers closed around the glass, but he did not drink. Valentina's smile stayed in place. Mila could feel something behind it, a silent pressure filling the room. Gabriel finally brought the shake to his mouth and swallowed. Mila noticed the faintest bitterness in his expression, the slight delay before he lowered the glass. A few minutes later, while Mila wrote her notes in the hall outside the recovery room, she heard Gabriel cough. It was soft at first, then rougher. One of the guards called for water. Valentina's voice floated through the doorway, calm and sweet. He is tired. Therapy was probably too much for him. Mila's pen stopped moving. The next days settled into a strange rhythm. Every morning Mila entered the mansion through the side security entrance, past men who grew more respectful each time she arrived, and stepped into the recovery room, where Gabriel waited with his temper already sharpened. He fought her on every small task. He complained about the exercises. He accused her of enjoying his humiliation. He told her no one in his house had the right to order him around. Mila listened, adjusted his brace, and ordered him around anyway. Yet something changed slowly. He stopped insulting her body. Then he stopped pretending he did not need her help. Then, on the fourth morning, when his hand slipped during a transfer, and his weight shifted dangerously forward, he reached for her instead of the armrest. Mila braced herself with one foot back, her strong body holding his larger frame steady before he could fall. His face was inches from hers, his breath uneven, his hands gripping her arms. For a long moment, neither of them moved. "I told you," she said softly. "I can support you." Gabriel's gaze dropped to where her hands held him safely at the ribs and shoulder. Shame flickered across his face, but it did not turn into cruelty this time. "Most people would have let me fall. Most people are afraid of you. And you are not." Mila looked at him, really looked at him, past the expensive watch, past the scar, past the name that made grown men lower their voices. "I am afraid of what pain can make people become," she said. "I am not afraid of a man trying to learn how to stand again." Something in him went quiet after that. He let her guide him back into the chair. He did not speak for the rest of the session except to ask once if he was placing his foot correctly. It was the first real question he had asked her. Not a command, not a complaint. A question. Outside the room, the mansion carried its secrets like heavy curtains. Masor saw men arrive and leave through private halls. She heard low conversation stop when she turned corners. She watched Gabriel's uncle, Carlo Russo, come in with papers and leave looking unsettled. She watched the house doctor, Dr. Bellamy, avoid her eyes whenever she asked about medication timing. And she watched Valentina bring Gabriel the same pale green shake every afternoon. Always in the same crystal glass, always with the same soft command wrapped in affection. Each time he drank it, the day changed. His hand trembled more, his skin lost color, his energy drained too fast, his pain response became strained, not just sharp from injury but heavy and fogged, like his body was being pulled underwater. Mila checked the chart. The notes blamed trauma, nerve shock, emotional instability, and lack of discipline. The wording bothered her. It felt less like medicine, and more like a story someone wanted everyone to believe. On Friday, after a difficult session, Gabriel managed to lift himself from the chair with Mila's support and hold his weight for the length of one slow breath. It was not graceful. His right leg shook badly, his face twisted with pain. Mila stood close, her arms steady around him, her voice low near his ear. "Breathe. Do not fight your own body, let it remember." He did. For one breath, then another. The room disappeared around them. No guards, no mansion, no family name. Only a wounded man, standing because a woman everyone dismissed had the strength and patience to help him rise. When he sat back down, his eyes were darker than before, but not with anger. "Do not tell them," he said. Mila understood. "I write what is medically necessary. I do not perform hope for an audience." Gabriel looked at her for a long time. "Why are you really here?" She gave a small smile. "Because your sister-in-law fired your last therapist after he cried in the driveway. He was weak. He was exhausted. He was afraid of me." "He should have been afraid of bad body mechanics," Mila said. "You nearly dragged him down with you." This time Gabriel did smile. It changed his whole face and made him look briefly like a man who had existed before blood, betrayal, and pain hardened him. Mila felt the effect of it in her chest and looked down at her notes before it showed on her face. Then Valentina entered. The smile vanished from Gabriel's face so quickly. Mila wondered if she had imagined it. Valentina carried the shake, but this time there was another man with her, thin and nervous, holding a leather folder. Dr. Bellamy updated the evaluation. Valentina said, "The family needs to prepare for difficult decisions." Gabriel's eyes narrowed. What decisions? Valentina set the glass beside him and touched his shoulder. Only temporary legal protections, darling. No one wants to burden you while you are recovering. Mila watched the man with the folder avoid Gabriel's stare. She watched Valentina's thumb stroke lightly over Gabriel's shoulder, not in comfort but in control. She watched Gabriel reach for the shake with visible irritation, as if drinking it was easier than arguing while everyone stared. That evening, Mila stayed late to finish paperwork. Rain tapped against the tall windows. Most of the staff had shifted to the other side of the house, where dinner was being prepared for a private meeting. Mila passed the recovery room on her way out and saw the crystal glass still sitting on the tray, not fully empty. A small amount of the pale green drink clung to the bottom. She should have kept walking. She told herself it was not her place. She was a physical therapist, not a detective. This was a mafia house, and people who asked the wrong questions here did not simply lose jobs. They disappeared into quiet places. But then she remembered Gabriel's hand gripping her arm when he almost fell. She remembered the way his body weakened after each shake. She remembered Valentina's smile when she said everyone was trying to help him. Mila stepped into the room, took a clean sample container from her medical bag, and poured in the last of the shake. Behind her, the floor creaked. She turned quickly, her heart jumping into her throat. Gabriel sat in the open doorway, half-shadowed in his wheelchair, watching her with unreadable eyes. For a moment, the rain was the only sound in the room. Then he said quietly, "You noticed too." Mila stood with the sample container hidden halfway behind her hand, the pale green liquid catching the low light like something harmless. Gabriel watched her from the doorway, his face calm in a way that made the room feel smaller. His chair was angled slightly forward, one hand resting on the wheel, the other gripping the armrest with quiet force. For a few seconds, she could not tell if he was angry at her for crossing a line or relieved that someone else had finally seen the shadow moving through his house. Then he repeated the words, softer this time. "You noticed too." Mila slowly set the container on the tray. "You get weaker after you drink it," she said. "Not tired, not sore. Weaker, your hands shake more, your breathing changes, your pain response changes, and the reports in your file do not match what your body can actually do." Gabriel's eyes lowered to the glass. A strange look passed over his face, something bitter and exhausted. "Valentina says I am looking for enemies, because I cannot accept being injured. Are you?" He looked back at her. "I have lived long enough to know enemies do not always come through the gate with guns." Rain moved down the windows in thin silver lines. Mila heard voices somewhere in the distant part of the mansion, low and polished, the sound of a family pretending it was not built on fear. She should have walked away. She should have handed in her resignation, gone back to the clinic, and told herself Gabriel Russo's world was not hers to fix. But she had spent a week with his pain in her hands. She had felt his body fight for every small movement. She had seen the shame in his eyes when others looked at the wheelchair before they looked at the man. And now she was standing in the dark with the last swallow of a drink that might be stealing his recovery one glass at a time. "I can get this tested," Mila said. Quietly, "I have a friend from my hospital rotation who works in a private lab. She will not ask questions if I tell her not to." Gabriel studied her. "You understand what you are saying?" "I understand enough." "No," he said, his voice turning low. "You do not. If Valentina is doing this, she is not acting alone. She would need access to my medical team, my household staff, my legal papers, and members of my own family willing to look away. If you touch this, you are not just my therapist anymore. You become part of the war." Mila's fingers curled around the strap of her bag. "I became part of it the moment someone tried to use my notes to bury you." His expression changed, slowly, carefully, as if her words had reached something in him that pain had not destroyed. "You read Bellamy's report." "I read a lie," she said. "It says you have made no meaningful functional progress. That is false. It says your mental state makes you resistant to rehabilitation. That is incomplete. It says long-term physical independence is unlikely. That is not what I saw today." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Today never happened," Mila said. "Not to me." He let out a slow breath. For the first time since she had met him, the silence between them did not feel like a wall. It felt like a door opening. Mila took the sample home in the lining of her medical bag. She drove through the rain with both hands locked on the wheel, checking the mirror too often, feeling the weight of Gabriel's world following her even when the road behind her was empty. By midnight, the sample was in a lab 3 towns away, labeled under a false patient name. By morning, Mila had barely slept. She sat at her kitchen table in sweatpants and an old college hoodie, watching her phone like it might bite her. When the call came, her friend did not waste time with greetings. "Mila," she said quietly, "whatever this came from, do not drink it. It contains compounds that can cause muscle weakness, dizziness, nerve confusion, and respiratory strain in vulnerable patients. Not enough to kill someone quickly, enough to make them look like they are failing." Mila closed her eyes. There it was. Not fear anymore. Proof. When she returned to the mansion, Gabriel was waiting in the recovery room, already dressed, already pale, already furious in that controlled way that made the guards stand straighter. Valentina had visited before Mila arrived. The empty crystal glass sat on the table. Mila shut the door behind her. "It is real." For a long moment, Gabriel did not move. The whole room seemed to lean toward him. Then he smiled, but it held no warmth. I almost wanted to be wrong. Mila stepped closer and handed him the folded lab report. "You need to stop drinking them." "No," Gabriel said. Mila stared at him. "No? If I stop, she will know. If she knows, she runs, and the people helping her disappear into the walls. I need names. I need documents. I need her to believe she is winning. That is dangerous. So is trusting the wrong woman," he said, and then his gaze lifted to Mila with a softness that did not belong in his voice. "But I think I have finally found the right one." Mila's breath caught before she could stop it. She looked away first, not because she was weak, but because the tenderness in his eyes frightened her more than the guns outside his door. It was one thing to help a man stand. It was another to feel him begin to lean on her heart. They made a plan in whispers hidden inside ordinary therapy. To everyone else, Gabriel grew worse. He let his hand tremble when Valentina watched. He allowed Dr. Bellamy to record another poor progress note. He snapped at his guards, refused dinner, and let rumors move through the house like smoke. Valentina became brighter with every passing day. Her dresses grew sharper. Her smile grew easier. She began inviting Gabriel's uncles and captains to private lunches. She spoke gently about responsibility, stability, and the future of the Russo family. She never said the word power out loud, but it sat behind every sentence. Mila played her part too. She looked discouraged in the hallway. She let Valentina find her once with her head bowed over Gabriel's file. She even allowed the beautiful woman to comfort her with a hand on her shoulder. "You must not blame yourself," Valentina said, her perfume sweet and cold. "Some bodies simply do not recover the way we hope." Mila looked up at her. "You seem very prepared for that." Valentina's smile paused, only for a heartbeat. "Someone has to be realistic." "Yes," Mila said softly. "Someone does." After that, the mansion began to reveal itself. A junior nurse slipped Mila a copy of Gabriel's medication schedule because she was frightened and had noticed missing entries. A guard named Nico admitted that Valentina's assistant had been moving sealed envelopes from Bellamy's office to Carlo Russo's study. Gabriel's old driver told Mila that Valentina had met with a private judge 2 weeks before Gabriel's latest evaluation. Each little truth was a thread. Mila gathered them quietly. Gabriel's loyal men pulled them tighter. By the end of the week, the picture was no longer a suspicion. It was a trap, with Valentina standing proudly at the center. She had changed the recovery shakes. She had paid Bellamy to write false reports. She had convinced Carlo that Gabriel's weakness would destroy the family. She had prepared legal papers that would place temporary control of Russo Holdings in her hands as Gabriel's future wife and medical guardian. It was elegant, cruel, almost perfect. Almost. The family meeting was set for Sunday evening. Snow began falling before sunset, soft at first, then heavier, covering the black cars in the driveway and turning the trees beyond the windows into pale ghosts. The dining hall was opened for the first time since Gabriel's shooting. Long candles burned down the center of the table. Men arrived in dark suits with guarded faces. Gabriel Russo sat near the head with restless hands. Dr. Bellamy stood near the fireplace, pretending to review papers he already knew by heart. Valentina sat beside Gabriel's empty place, wearing white silk like a grieving bride who had not waited for death before claiming the widow's chair. Gabriel entered last in his wheelchair, pushed by Nico. Mila walked behind him carrying her therapy bag, dressed simply in a dark green blouse and black trousers. Valentina's eyes moved over her with open irritation. "I do not think staff should be present for this," Valentina said. Gabriel's voice was calm. "Mila stays. She is your therapist, darling. This is family business." He looked at her. "My body seems to be family business now. She is the only one in this house honest enough to discuss it." A ripple moved around the table. Carlo cleared his throat. "Gabriel, no one wants to disrespect you, but we cannot ignore the reports. Bellamy says your condition is declining." Bellamy lifted his chin, sweat already shining near his hairline. "In my professional opinion, Mr. Russo is not physically or emotionally fit to manage high-stress operations." Valentina placed a hand over her heart. "This is painful for all of us. Gabriel has built everything with strength, but strength also means knowing when to rest. I only want to protect him." Mila stood silent behind Gabriel. She could feel his breathing, slow, controlled. His right hand rested beneath the table, fingers curled around the edge of the chair. She knew what it cost him not to explode. Valentina opened a leather folder and slid papers forward. "These documents are temporary. They allow me to act in Gabriel's best interest until his recovery improves. Once he is well, everything returns to him. And if I do not get well?" Gabriel asked. Her eyes softened beautifully. "Then I will carry your legacy." The words floated through the candlelit room like poison in a crystal glass. Gabriel looked at the papers, then at Valentina, then at Bellamy. "How long have you been practicing that?" Valentina's smile thinned. "I know this is hard." "No," he said. "Pain is hard. Waking up unable to move your leg is hard. Watching people pity you when they used to fear you is hard. This is only insulting." Carlo leaned forward. "Gabriel, sign the papers. We will revisit this in 6 months." Gabriel's gaze shifted to his uncle. "You always were impatient." Carlo's face flushed. "Do not turn this into disrespect. We are trying to save the family." "No," Gabriel said. "You are trying to survive under whoever you think is strongest. That used to be me. Then Valentina convinced you I was finished." Valentina stood. "Enough. This is exactly what Bellamy warned us about. Paranoia, rage, delusion. You are not well, Gabriel." Mila moved then, quietly. She stepped to the side of his chair and placed one hand on his shoulder. The room watched her as if she had no right to touch him in front of them. Gabriel looked up at her. In his eyes she saw pain, trust, fear, and something deeper than all three. Ready, his mouth barely moved. "No." She smiled softly. "Good. We will do it anyway." Mila set her feet apart, strong and grounded. She braced one hand under his arm and the other at his back, exactly where his body needed support. Gabriel planted his left foot. His right leg trembled in the brace. Every face in the room turned toward him. Valentina's expression changed first, the smooth mask cracking as Gabriel pushed against the chair. For one terrible second, it looked like his body would fail. His face tightened with pain. Mila felt his weight shift hard into her, and she took it without bending. Her full, steady body became the support his pride could not ask for out loud. She held him not as a servant, not as a nurse, not as a woman beneath him, but as the strength beside him. "Breathe," she whispered. Gabriel breathed, then the feared head of the Russo family stood. The room went silent. Not polite silent, not surprised silent. The kind of silence that comes when a lie dies in public. Valentina stepped back as if he had risen from a grave. "That is impossible." Gabriel's hand remained on Mila's shoulder, but his eyes were on Valentina. "You should have paid more attention to the woman you kept mocking." Nico placed a thick folder on the table. Another guard connected a tablet to the wall screen. The first image appeared. Lab results. Then copies of altered medical reports. Then payment transfers to Bellamy. Then security footage of Valentina's assistant entering the restricted medication pantry. Then a recording from Carlo's study, Valentina's voice clear and cold as she explained that Gabriel did not need to die. He only needed to look broken long enough for the family to move on without him. Valentina's face turned white. Bellamy dropped the papers he was holding. Carlo stared at the table as if the wood might open and hide him. Gabriel stood through all of it. His body shook. Sweat darkened his temples. Mila knew he was in agony, but she also knew he would rather collapse than sit down before they understood what they had done. So she held him. Every time his balance wavered, she adjusted. Every time his breath caught, she steadied him, and every person in that room saw the truth. Gabriel Russo had not stood because he was untouched by weakness. He had stood because Mila Hart was strong enough to help him fight through it. "You poisoned me," Gabriel said. Valentina's eyes filled with tears on command. "I loved you. I was trying to protect what you were destroying. You loved the chair," he said. "You loved the signature. You loved the empire you thought would be easier to control if I was too ashamed to look anyone in the eye." Her softness vanished. "You were becoming useless." The word struck the room harder than a slap. Mila felt Gabriel's body tense under her hands. Then Mila spoke, calm and clear. "No, he was injured. There is a difference. You counted on everyone confusing the two." Valentina turned on her. "And you think you matter? You are a hired woman in stretch fabric who got lucky standing close to a powerful man." Mila felt the old familiar sting rise, the one she had carried since childhood from strangers, patients' families, polished women at front desks, people who looked at her body and decided they knew her limits. But this time it did not make her shrink. Gabriel's hand covered hers on his shoulder. "She matters more than anyone in this room," he said. "Because when all of you saw a broken man, she saw a patient. When you saw weakness, she saw work. When you tried to make my body a prison, she became the reason I walked back to the door." Nico and two guards moved toward Valentina. She looked around for help, but Carlo would not meet her eyes. Bellamy was already whispering that he could explain. No one reached for her. No one defended her. The power she had built on whispers vanished the moment the truth stood upright in front of her. As they took her from the room, Valentina looked back once, not at Gabriel, but at Mila. Her face was twisted with disbelief, as if she still could not understand how a woman she considered beneath notice had destroyed her perfect plan. When the doors closed, Gabriel's strength finally gave. Mila felt it before anyone else did. His knees softened, his breath broke. She lowered him carefully back into the wheelchair, protecting his leg, guiding his body, keeping his dignity intact even in the collapse. He closed his eyes, jaw tight, one hand still gripping hers. The room waited. Gabriel opened his eyes and looked at the men around the table. "Anyone who signed with her leaves tonight with nothing. Anyone who knew and stayed silent will answer to Nico. Anyone who thinks my recovery makes me less dangerous should remember what just happened. I stood once. I will stand again." No one spoke against him. Carlo bowed his head. "Gabriel, I made a mistake." Gabriel's eyes were empty when he looked at his uncle. "No, Mila made a mistake once during therapy and corrected it before I fell. What you made was a choice." By midnight, the mansion had changed. Bellamy was gone. Carlo was under guard. Valentina's rooms were emptied by staff who no longer whispered her name with fear. The legal papers were burned in the fireplace of Gabriel's study while snow pressed against the windows. Mila sat in a chair near the hearth, exhausted down to her bones. Her hands ached, her back hurt, her heart would not slow down. Gabriel sat across from her, a blanket over his legs, his face still pale from the effort of standing. For a while neither of them spoke. The fire filled the silence. Finally, Mila said, "You should rest. I should thank you." "You can do both," he smiled faintly. "You saved my life. I helped you save your own." "No," he said, and his voice was gentle now, stripped of the cold command he used with everyone else. "Before you came here, I thought recovery meant becoming the man I was before. You taught me that maybe strength is not going backward. Maybe it is letting someone stand close enough to catch you." Mila looked down, emotion burning behind her eyes. "You make it sound prettier than it was. You were difficult." "I was cruel." "Yes," she said. "You were." Gabriel nodded slowly. "I am sorry. The apology was quiet. No performance, no pride trying to survive it. Mila looked at him then and saw the man beneath the name, beneath the violence, beneath the fear everyone else carried for him. A wounded man, a dangerous man, a man who had been betrayed in the one place where he was supposed to be safe. "I accept," she said. Weeks passed and winter softened into early spring. Gabriel's recovery was not a miracle, and Mila refused to let anyone call it one. Miracles were too easy. They erased the sweat, the pain, the shaking muscles, the mornings when he wanted to quit, the afternoons when she had to remind him that anger used energy he needed for standing. Slowly, Gabriel changed. He still ruled the Russo family with a voice that could quiet a room, but inside the therapy space he listened. He worked. He failed. He tried again. The first time he took 3 steps with a cane, the guards outside pretended not to cheer. The first time he crossed the recovery room without the wheelchair, Mila cried in the supply closet and denied it when he asked. The first time he walked into a family meeting on his own feet, every man at the table stood before he reached his chair. Mila remained his therapist until the day she told him he no longer needed daily sessions. Gabriel did not like that. He disliked it so much. He stared at her for almost a full minute before saying, "Then I will hire you for something else." "I am not joining your crime family," Mila said. "No," he said. "You are not joining anything. You are choosing what place you want in my life." Her heart went still. He stood in front of her with his cane in one hand, steady enough now that she did not need to touch him unless she wanted to. "I have had people fear me, use me, betray me, obey me, and depend on me. You were the first person who demanded that I become better without needing me to become smaller. I do not want a life where you only arrive for appointments and leave before dinner." Mila swallowed. "Gabriel, I love you," he said, simple and certain. "Not because you saved me, not because you stood behind me in that room, because you saw all of me when I could barely stand to look at myself." Mila looked at the man who had once mocked her body because he could not bear his own brokenness. She looked at the cane in his hand, the scar near his temple, the quiet hope in his eyes. She thought about every person who had tried to make her feel too big, too plain, too ordinary, too much, and then she stepped closer, took his free hand, and let herself be fully seen. "I love you too," she whispered. Gabriel kissed her like a vow, careful and deep, one hand at her waist, the other still holding the cane that proved how far he had come. There was no audience, no family meeting, no enemy watching from the shadows. Only the man who had learned to stand, and the woman who had never needed to be smaller to be strong. By summer, people in the Russo mansion no longer called Mila the therapist. They called her Miss Hart with respect in their voices. And when Gabriel looked at her across crowded rooms, even his oldest captains understood that she was not an ornament beside him, or a soft place he visited when the world became hard. She was the woman who had found poison in a glass, truth in a stack of lies, and strength in a body others dismissed. She had not taken Gabriel's power. She had returned it to him, and in doing so discovered her own. And when Gabriel Russo finally walked through the black iron gates of his mansion without a wheelchair behind him, Mila walked at his side, her hand resting in his, her head high, her full body wrapped in sunlight. The world had tried to teach her that strength had one shape. Gabriel's enemies had made the same mistake, but in the end the woman they mocked as too big, too soft, and too ordinary became the steady force that held an empire upright. Gabriel had survived bullets, betrayal, and poison, but it was Mila Hart who taught him how to live again. And from that day forward, no one in the Russo family ever forgot that the strongest person in the mansion was not always the one with the gun, the title, or the throne. Sometimes she was the woman standing quietly beside it, strong enough to help a king rise. The night Marcus Hale threw his wife into the freezing rain, he believed he was finally stepping into the life he deserved. He believed the soft woman he had hidden behind polite smiles and expensive lies was nothing more than dead weight from his past. He believed Chicago's richest families would admire him for cutting her loose in front of everyone. What Marcus did not know was that the rain outside his mansion was carrying Isabella Romano straight into the path of a man who never forgot a debt. never forgave an insult, and never allowed anyone to hurt the woman who had once saved his blood. The mansion on Astor Street glowed like a palace against the dark Chicago sky. Tall windows spilled warm gold light across the wet stone driveway, while black cars rolled up one after another, bringing investors, judges, bankers, and people who smiled with perfect teeth while hiding hunger behind their eyes. Inside, everything smelled of polished wood, white roses, expensive wine, and the kind of money that wanted to be seen without ever admitting it wanted attention. Crystal glasses chimed softly. A string quartet played near the marble staircase. Servers moved through the crowd with silver trays, their eyes lowered, their steps careful, as if even the air inside that house belonged to Marcus Hale. Isabella Romano stood near the edge of the dining room, holding a glass of untouched water between both hands. She wore a midnight blue dress that she had bought 3 years ago for another party. Back when Marcus still kissed her shoulder before walking into a room, back when he still called her beautiful in a voice low enough that she believed him. The dress was soft and simple. It covered her rounded arms and fell gently over her wide hips, but it no longer felt like something chosen with love. It felt like armor. Thin armor. The kind that looked pretty under a chandelier but did nothing to stop a knife. She watched Marcus laugh near the fireplace, one hand resting on the lower back of a young woman in a silver dress. Her name was Vanessa Cole. She was the daughter of one of his newest investors, all sharp bones, glossy hair, and easy confidence. Vanessa leaned close when Marcus spoke, letting her hand rest on his chest in a way no woman should touch another woman's husband. Marcus did not move away. He smiled wider. He looked alive in a way Isabella had not seen in years, and the sight of it was so quiet and painful that she almost wished he would simply slap her. A slap would have ended. This kind of shame kept breathing. For years, Isabella had helped build the world that now rejected her. She had stayed up late reading Marcus's contracts when his eyes blurred from stress. She had made phone calls he was too proud to make. She had remembered names, softened tempers, mailed thank-you gifts, covered debts, explained mistakes, and smiled beside him when he needed a loyal wife to make him look stable. In the early days, before the mansion, before the private driver, before the people in tailored suits started calling him visionary, Marcus had come home shaking from failed meetings and unpaid bills. Isabella had held him then. She had cooked pasta in a tiny kitchen with a broken window and told him he was not finished. She had believed in him so fiercely that she forgot to keep any belief for herself. Now, in the house her patience had helped buy, she felt like a guest no one wanted to seat. Mrs. Whitaker, the wife of Marcus's largest investor, drifted toward her with a smile so delicate it almost looked kind. Her diamonds flashed at her throat, her eyes did not. "Isabella, dear," she said softly, looking down at Isabella's dress, then at her body, then back at her face. "I hope you are enjoying the evening." "It's lovely," Isabella answered. Mrs. Whitaker's smile tightened. "Marcus has done so well for himself. It must be exciting to see him rise this far." Isabella knew what the woman meant. It must be exciting that a man like Marcus still lets someone like you stand nearby. She had learned to hear the words under the words. Wealthy people rarely needed to be loud to be cruel. They could slice you open with a compliment and leave no blood on the floor. Before Isabella could answer, Marcus appeared beside them. His black tuxedo fit him perfectly. His dark hair was brushed back. His smile was calm, charming, and empty. He looked at Mrs. Whitaker first, not at his wife. "I hope Isabella isn't boring you," he said with a light laugh. Mrs. Whitaker gave him a playful look. "Not at all." Marcus finally turned toward Isabella. His eyes moved over her with quick irritation, as if she were a stain on his perfect evening. "You should mingle," he said quietly. "Standing in corners makes people uncomfortable." Isabella's fingers tightened around her glass. "I was speaking with Mrs. Whitaker." "Of course," Marcus said, still smiling for the room. "But try not to look so nervous. People can sense insecurity." The words were soft, but Isabella felt them land. She looked down, swallowing the ache in her throat. There had been a time when Marcus protected her from rooms like this. Now he fed her to them one small bite at a time. Dinner was announced just after 9. The guests moved into the long dining room, where candles burned in crystal holders and the table stretched beneath a ceiling painted with pale clouds. Isabella found her name card near the far end, 3 seats away from Marcus. Vanessa sat beside him. Isabella stared at the seating arrangement, her face warming. She did not speak. She simply lowered herself into the chair and folded her hands in her lap, while laughter lifted around her like smoke. The first course came, then the second. Marcus spoke about expansion, land acquisition, investment returns, and the future of Hale development. People listened as if every sentence he spoke was carved from gold. Isabella listened too, hearing the old fear hiding beneath his confidence. Marcus always sounded grandest when he was closest to falling. A man near the head of the table asked how Marcus had managed to survive the early years when so many developers failed. Marcus smiled and lifted his wineglass. Discipline, he said, vision, knowing what to keep and what to cut away. A few guests nodded. Vanessa touched his arm. Isabella felt something cold move through her chest. Marcus continued, his voice growing richer under the attention. Success requires sacrifice. Sometimes you outgrow people who were part of your life when you had less. The table quieted, not completely, but enough. Isabella slowly raised her eyes. Marcus looked at her then, really looked at her. Not with love, not with regret, with decision. I suppose tonight is as good a time as any, he said. The room became still. Isabella's heart began to beat so hard she could feel it in her wrists. Marcus set down his glass and stood. Many of you have known me for years. You have watched me build something from nothing. And during that time, I have tried to keep my private life private. But the truth is, I have been carrying a marriage that no longer fits the life I have worked for. Isabella could not move. A small smile touched Vanessa's mouth. Marcus looked around the table, inviting pity, admiration, curiosity. Isabella was with me in the beginning, he said. I won't deny that, but beginnings are not destinies. A man has to move forward. He cannot spend his whole life apologizing for wanting beauty, ambition, and someone who represents the world he belongs in now. The silence sharpened. Isabella whispered, Marcus. He ignored her. I am filing for divorce, he said clearly, and I am done pretending that this marriage is anything but a reminder of a life I left behind. A few guests looked away. Others stared openly, hungry for the drama. Mrs. Whittaker pressed a hand to her mouth, but her eyes shone. Vanessa lowered her gaze with practiced softness, as if she were not standing at the center of another woman's ruin. Isabella pushed her chair back slowly. The legs scraped the polished floor. Please don't do this here, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus turned on her, and for 1 second the mask slipped. She saw the resentment he had been feeding for years. Why not here? He asked. You had no problem standing beside me when I was struggling. Why shouldn't everyone see the truth now? The truth? Isabella repeated. The truth is that you let yourself become an embarrassment, Marcus said. The words came out smooth, almost gentle, which made them worse. I worked to become someone. I built a place among people who matter, and every room I enter I have to drag you behind me like a reminder of everything I escaped. Pain moved across Isabella's face, but she did not cry. Not yet. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound intimate while still letting everyone hear. Look at you. You don't fit here. You never did. You're soft, tired, always hiding behind loyalty like it gives you value. I need a wife who adds to my life, not one people pity me for keeping. A woman at the table inhaled sharply. No one defended Isabella. No one stood. No one told Marcus to stop. That was the moment Isabella understood something that hurt almost as much as his words. This world had accepted her sacrifices when they were invisible. It had eaten from her hands, smiled at her patience, enjoyed the comfort she created. But now that she needed even a little kindness, it looked away. She stood fully, though her knees trembled. Everything you have, she said softly. I helped you carry. Marcus laughed once, cold and short. No, Isabella. You helped yourself believe that because the truth was too painful. I carried you. I gave you this house, this name, this life, and still you couldn't become someone worth showing off. Her throat tightened. The room blurred at the edges. She wanted to remind him of the nights he cried into her lap, The unpaid taxes she found a way to settle, the investor dinner she saved when he forgot half the proposal, the call she made years ago to a man whose name Marcus never knew, a man connected to money Marcus was never supposed to touch. But she said none of it. Pride held her still when love could not. Marcus reached for her wrist. His grip was hard enough to hurt. "Come with me." "Let go," she whispered. He pulled her away from the table. The guests parted as if she carried disease. Isabella stumbled behind him through the dining room, past the roses, past the music, past the mirrored hallway where she caught one broken glimpse of herself. A plus-size woman in a blue dress, cheeks pale, eyes wide, being dragged from her own home by the man she had once saved from failure. At the front doors, Marcus released her only long enough to grab her coat from the closet. Then he stopped, looked at the coat, and smiled with sudden cruelty. "No," he said. "You came into my new life dressed like a burden. You can leave it the same way." He opened the front doors. Cold air rushed in. Rain blew across the marble entryway. Isabella stared at the storm. "Marcus, my shoes." One of her heels had slipped off near the dining room when he pulled her away. The other was loose on her foot. Marcus looked down, then back at her face. "Walk." Then he shoved her. Isabella stumbled onto the front steps. Her bare foot hit freezing stone. The remaining heel twisted beneath her, and she fell hard onto her knees. Pain shot up her legs. Rain soaked her hair in seconds. Behind her, warm light spilled from the mansion like a cruel memory. She looked back once and saw Marcus standing in the doorway, perfect and dry, framed by wealth. "You threw away the only person who loved you when you were nothing," she said. His expression flickered, but only for a moment. "Then I'll enjoy being something without you," he replied. The doors closed. The sound was soft. Final, for a long moment, Isabella stayed on the wet stone steps, the rain running down her face so heavily it hid the tears that finally came. Her knees throbbed, her palms burned where they had scraped the ground, her dress clung to her body, her breath came in small shaking pulls. Somewhere inside the mansion the music began again. That almost broke her. Not the divorce, not Vanessa, not even the insults. It was the music, the way the party continued. The way the world Marcus wanted so badly swallowed her humiliation and went right back to drinking. Isabella forced herself to stand. She had no purse, no phone, no coat, one bare foot, one broken heel. The iron gate at the end of the drive looked impossibly far away. She walked anyway. Each step hurt, the cold bit into her skin. Rain soaked the soft curves of her arms and ran down her back. She wrapped both arms around herself and kept moving through the long driveway. Past the parked cars, past the silent security guard who looked at her and then looked away. That small cowardice felt familiar. Most people were brave only when kindness cost them nothing. By the time she reached the sidewalk, she was shaking so hard she could barely breathe. The street was dark and glossy with rain. The old mansions of the Gold Coast stood around her like judges. Isabella looked left then right, not knowing where to go. She thought of the woman she had been before Marcus, the girl from a crowded Italian family who believed love was something you fed, protected, and forgave. She thought of her father teaching her how to make sauce on Sunday mornings. She thought of her mother warning her that a man ashamed of your softness would eventually become ashamed of your soul. A black car slowed near the curb. Isabella stiffened. For one wild second, she thought Marcus had sent someone to bring her back. But the car was not one of his. It was longer, darker, quieter, the kind of vehicle that did not need to announce power because power moved out of its way. The rear door opened. A man stepped out under the rain without an umbrella. He was tall, dressed in a dark coat that looked almost black beneath the streetlights. His hair was thick and neatly pushed back, his face sharp in a way that made him look carved rather than born. He did not rush. He did not shout. He simply stood there, looking at Isabella with eyes so dark and still that the storm itself seemed to soften around him. Two other men stepped out behind him. They were broad, silent, and watchful. Isabella took a step back. The man's gaze dropped to her bare feet, her scraped palms, her soaked dress, then lifted to her face. Something changed in him. Not shock exactly, recognition. "Isabella Romano," he said, her breath caught. "Do I know you?" His jaw tightened. Rain traced down the side of his face, but he did not blink. "No," he said, "but I know you." Fear moved through her, soft and cold. "I don't understand." The man took one slow step closer. The two men behind him stayed near the car. "Years ago, a boy was shot outside a closed restaurant on Taylor Street. Everyone ran, you didn't. You tied your scarf around his wound, called for help, and stayed with him until he stopped shaking." Isabella's lips parted, the memory returned in pieces. A winter night. A young man bleeding in an alley. Her hands covered in red. Marcus yelling from the car that they needed to leave. Isabella refusing. She had never learned the boy's name. She had only known he was scared, too young to die, and begging in Italian for his brother. The man in front of her looked at her with something far deeper than gratitude. "That boy was my brother," he said. "Nico Moretti." The name moved through the air like a match struck in darkness. Everyone in Chicago knew the Moretti name, even people who pretended not to. Luca Moretti was not spoken of loudly. He lived in rumors, in closed restaurants, in sudden business failures, in men who changed their tone when his car passed by. He was the shadow behind half the city's fear. Isabella stared at him, rain chilling her skin. "You're Luca." Yes, she should have run. She knew that. A woman with sense would have turned and moved away from the most feared man in Chicago. But her legs were numb, her heart was broken, and something in Luca Moretti's face held her still. He was not looking at her the way Marcus had. He was not embarrassed by her. He was not measuring her against the women inside the mansion. He looked at her as if the rain-soaked, shaking woman on the sidewalk was someone of great importance. Luca removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders. The warmth was immediate. So was the smell of him, cedar, smoke, and clean wool. Isabella clutched the edges without meaning to. "Who did this to you?" Luca asked. She looked back at the glowing mansion. Luca followed her gaze. For a moment he said nothing. Then his expression went very calm, too calm. "Marcus Hale," he said. Isabella closed her eyes. "He's my husband." "No," Luca said softly. "He is the man who forgot what you were worth." She looked at him then, and for the first time all night, a sob escaped her. She tried to cover it, but her body was too tired to hide anything. Luca moved closer, not touching her yet, waiting as if she were something wounded and sacred. "Isabella," he said, his voice low, "you saved my brother and asked for nothing. Not money, not protection, not even a name. For 7 years, I have wondered what kind of woman does that and disappears." She shook her head. "I only did what anyone should have done." "No," Luca said. "You did what most people pretend they would do." The words settled over her with strange, aching warmth. Behind them, laughter drifted faintly from the mansion. Luca's eyes sharpened. He looked past Isabella toward the tall windows where Marcus's guests moved like shadows behind gold light. "Did he put you out without a coat?" Luca asked. Isabella swallowed. "Yes. Without shoes." She did not answer. That was answer enough. Luca turned his head slightly. One of his men stepped forward. "Get the car warm," Luca said. "Call Dr. Bellini. Tell her we are coming to the house. And find everything on Marcus Hale. Every loan, every investor, every secret account, every lie he has ever told." The man nodded and moved quickly. Isabella's stomach tightened. "Please don't hurt anyone because of me." Luca looked back at her. His face softened just a little. "I do not hurt people because of you, Isabella. I answer what they did to you." "That sounds the same." "It isn't." She almost laughed, but it broke into another shiver. Luca noticed immediately. Without asking, he bent and lifted her into his arms. Isabella gasped, panic rushing through her. "No, wait. I'm too heavy." Luca's hold tightened, steady and effortless. His eyes locked onto hers. "Never say that to me again." Her breath caught. He carried her toward the car as if she weighed nothing, as if the body Marcus had mocked was not a burden but something precious pulled from a storm. Isabella did not know what to do with that. She did not know where to place the feeling of being held without shame. So she gripped his coat, lowered her face, and let the rain hide the last of her tears. As Luca settled her into the warm back seat, the mansion doors opened behind them. Marcus stepped out onto the front steps, Vanessa beside him, both of them staring at the black car by the curb. For the first time that night, Marcus did not look pleased. Luca turned slowly. Even from the car, Isabella saw Marcus's face change as he recognized him. The confidence drained first, then the color, then the smile. Luca said nothing. He only looked at Marcus across the rain. It was not a threat. It was a promise. Then he got into the car beside Isabella, closed the door, and the warm darkness wrapped around them both. As the vehicle pulled away from the mansion, Isabella looked through the tinted window at the life she had been thrown out of. The gold lights grew smaller. The music faded. Marcus stood frozen on the steps, suddenly looking less like a king and more like a man who had just made the most dangerous mistake of his life. Luca reached across the seat and gently covered Isabella's scraped hand with his own. "You are safe now," he said. Isabella did not fully believe him, not yet. But as the car moved through the rain-washed streets of Chicago, away from the house where she had been broken, and toward a world she did not understand, she felt something small and strange wake inside her chest. It was not happiness. It was not trust. It was the first breath after drowning, and somewhere behind them, inside a mansion full of frightened whispers, Marcus Hale was beginning to learn that some women are not abandoned. Some women are returned to the people powerful enough to make the whole city kneel. The car moved through Chicago like a black shadow slipping between rain and streetlight, carrying Isabella away from the house where her old life had ended. She sat wrapped in Luca Moretti's coat, her wet hair sticking to her cheeks, her scraped hands resting in her lap while the city blurred beyond the tinted glass. She kept expecting Marcus to call. She kept expecting the car to turn around. Some part of her, the tired part that had spent years forgiving him before he even apologized, still thought this had to be a nightmare that would correct itself by morning. But Marcus had closed the door. The music had started again, and Luca Moretti, a man feared by men who feared no one, sat beside her in silence as if her broken heart was something dangerous enough to deserve respect. Luca did not fill the quiet with empty comfort. He did not tell her she was lucky to be away from Marcus. He did not tell her to stop crying. He simply kept his hand near hers, warm and steady, letting her decide whether to pull away. That small patience was almost harder to bear than cruelty. Isabella knew how to survive cruelty. She had learned to smile through Marcus's sharp comments, laugh softly when investors looked past her, and swallow her hurt until it became part of her breathing. But kindness, real kindness, made her feel like glass. One touch and she might shatter. They arrived at Luca's home just before midnight. It was not a mansion meant to impress strangers. It stood behind iron gates on a quiet, tree-lined street, surrounded by old stone walls, black cameras, and men who looked like they belonged to the darkness itself. The house was wide and severe, with ivy climbing the sides and warm light glowing from deep windows. It felt older than money, older than fear. It felt like a place that had watched generations of powerful men make promises and break them. Luca stepped out first, then turned and reached for Isabella. She tried to stand on her own, but her legs trembled before her feet touched the ground. Without a word, he lifted her again. This time she did not protest. She was too cold, too tired, too hollow. She rested one hand against his shoulder and felt the steady strength beneath his coat. His jaw was tight, his eyes were forward. Anyone watching might have thought he was calm, but Isabella could feel the anger in the way he held her, careful as a prayer, controlled as a blade. Inside, the house smelled of firewood, leather, and basil. A doctor waited in a sitting room with a leather bag open beside her. Luca set Isabella on a sofa near the fireplace, then stepped back only far enough to give the doctor room. The woman cleaned Isabella's palms, checked her knees, wrapped her feet in warm towels, and spoke to her in a low, gentle voice. Isabella answered when she could. Mostly, she stared into the fire and listened to the rain tapping against the windows. When the doctor left, Luca returned with a mug of tea. He handed it to Isabella himself. "Drink," he said softly. "It will help with the shaking." "I'm not shaking because I'm cold," she whispered. "I know." She looked down at the tea, steam curled into the air between them. "You shouldn't have brought me here." "Yes," Luca said. "I should have brought you here 7 years ago." Her eyes lifted to his. He sat across from her, not too close, not too far. Nico tried to find you after he recovered. He only remembered your first name and your face. He remembered that you kept talking to him, so he would not close his eyes. He remembered you telling him that his brother was coming, even though you did not know if that was true. Isabella's fingers tightened around the mug. He was scared. He was dying, Luca said. You stopped that from happening. I was just there. No, Luca said, his voice deepening. Other people were there. They ran. You stayed. The words settled into the room, heavy and warm. Isabella looked toward the fire. Marcus was angry at me that night. We were late to a dinner. He said I embarrassed him by getting involved. Luca's eyes darkened. He said that while my brother was bleeding, he said a lot of things. She tried to smile, but it faded before it could become real. He always said them softly at first. Luca leaned back, his face unreadable. Men like Marcus start with soft cruelty because they are cowards. They test how much pain a woman will excuse in the name of love. Then they build a throne on her silence. Isabella closed her eyes. The sentence found something inside her she had not been ready to name. Marcus had built so much on her silence. His confidence, his reputation, his whole beautiful lie. A door opened behind them. Isabella turned and saw a young man standing at the edge of the room. He looked like Luca, but softer, younger, with kinder eyes and a faint scar near his jaw. His face changed the moment he saw her. Isabella, he said. She knew before Luca spoke. Nico Moretti crossed the room slowly, as if approaching someone sacred. Then he dropped to one knee in front of the sofa, took her bandaged hand with careful reverence and bowed his head over it. You saved my life, he whispered. I never got to thank you. Isabella's throat closed. You lived, she said. That was enough. Nico looked up at her, his eyes bright. Not for us. Something broke then, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly inside her chest. Isabella covered her mouth as a sob escaped. Nico rose and stepped back, giving her space, but Luca moved closer, kneeling beside the sofa. He did not touch her until she reached for him. Then he took her into his arms, and she cried against his shoulder while the fire burned low, and the rain washed the city clean outside. By morning, Marcus Hale's world had already begun to crack. It started with phone calls that went unanswered. A bank manager who had once laughed at Marcus's jokes suddenly became unavailable. A land broker who had promised to finalize a deal stopped responding. 2 investors asked for updated financial disclosures. A journalist sent an email asking about delayed contractor payments. Marcus stood in his study wearing the same tuxedo shirt from the night before, staring at his phone as if the screen had betrayed him. Vanessa slept upstairs in the guest room, pleased with herself and unaware that the mansion beneath her was already sinking. Marcus paced between his desk and the windows, replaying the moment he had stepped outside and seen Luca Moretti by the curb. The memory made his stomach tighten. Luca had not spoken. He had not needed to. His silence had reached across the rain and wrapped around Marcus's throat. By noon, Marcus called Isabella. The number went straight to voicemail. He called again, then again. He sent a message, short and angry at first, then longer, then softer. He told her they needed to speak like adults. He told her she had misunderstood him. He told her she had humiliated him by leaving with that man. Then he deleted the last message before sending it, because even Marcus understood that demanding dignity from the woman he had thrown into the rain sounded dangerous. At Luca's house, Isabella did not see the messages. Her phone had been recovered from the mansion by one of Luca's men before sunrise, along with her purse, her broken heel, and a small box of jewelry Marcus had not thought she deserved to keep. Luca placed everything on a table in front of her after breakfast. Isabella looked at the phone for a long time before turning it face down. You do not have to answer him, Luca said. I know, she said, but her voice carried the surprise of someone learning a new language. Luca watched her from across the breakfast table. She wore a soft cream sweater one of the housekeepers had found for her, loose pants, and warm slippers. Her hair was still damp from the shower, falling naturally around her face. Without makeup, without diamonds, without Marcus standing beside her like an apology, she looked younger and more tired, but also more herself. Luca found that more dangerous than any dress could ever be. I need to tell you something, he said. Isabella looked up. Marcus's rise was not an accident. Her hand stilled near her cup. After you saved Nico, I found out who you were. I found your husband. At the time, he was drowning in debt and about to lose a development bid. You never asked me for anything, so I decided to repay the debt quietly. A recommendation here, a friendly investor there, a city permit that moved faster than it should have. Marcus believed doors opened because he was brilliant. They opened because I wanted the woman who saved my brother to have a secure life. Isabella stared at him. Marcus never knew? No. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. It hurt too much to be funny. All these years, he thought he built everything alone. Yes, and I thought I helped him build it. Luca's gaze softened. You did help him, but he mistook your loyalty for weakness and my protection for his own power. Isabella looked down at her hands. They were still marked from the fall. What happens now? That depends on you. She looked at him carefully. Men like you don't usually say that. No, Luca said, but women like you do not usually save my brother and disappear. For the first time, Isabella almost smiled. The next several days passed like a strange dream. Isabella remained inside Luca's house while Chicago whispered around her. Luca did not lock her doors. He did not force her to stay in one room, but his world surrounded her completely. Guards stood in the halls. Cars waited outside. Calls came in at all hours, with documents, tablets, folders, and quiet voices. Luca listened, decided, and changed lives with a few words spoken softly over coffee. Isabella should have been afraid. Sometimes she was. But fear was not the only thing she felt. She felt curiosity. She felt distance from the woman she had been. She wandered through Luca's library and found shelves of old poetry beside books on law, finance, and Italian history. She sat with Nico in the kitchen, while he told her how he had survived the shooting and how Luca had nearly torn the city apart looking for the men responsible. She helped the housekeeper make sauce one evening, and when Luca walked in to find flour on Isabella's cheek and Nico laughing beside her, he stopped in the doorway as if he had walked into a church. On the fourth night, Luca found Isabella standing before a full-length mirror in a room filled with gowns. A designer had come earlier with quiet respect and measuring tape, and now Isabella wore a deep emerald dress that held her body instead of hiding it. The fabric curved over her breasts, shaped softly at her waist, and fell in clean lines over her hips. She touched the side of the dress with uncertain fingers. "It is too much," she said when she saw Luca behind her in the mirror. "No," he said. "It is finally enough." She looked at him through the glass. Marcus would have hated this dress. Marcus hated anything that reminded him you were alive. The words should have hurt, but instead they steadied her. Isabella turned slowly. "Why are you doing all this?" Luca stepped into the room. "Because I owe you. That was 7 years ago. Then because I want to." "That sounds more dangerous." It is. Her breath caught at the honesty. Luca stopped close enough for her to feel the warmth of him, but not close enough to trap her. "Tomorrow night," he said, "Marcus will attend the Whitaker Foundation Gala. He believes he can still save himself there. He will try to convince the investors that the rumors are nothing. He will smile, he will lie, he will look for someone weaker to blame." "Me," Isabella whispered. "Yes." She looked away. Luca's voice became softer. "Come with me." Her eyes snapped back to his. "To the gala, yes." "I can't walk into that room." "You can. They all saw what happened. They saw what Marcus did," Luca said. "Tomorrow they will see what he lost." Silence stretched between them. Isabella looked back at the mirror. The woman staring at her looked unfamiliar. Not thin, not small, not hidden. She looked like someone who had been hurt and had survived long enough to become dangerous in a quiet way. "What if I break?" she asked. Luca's face softened. "Then I will stand close enough that no one sees." The Whitaker Foundation Gala filled the grand ballroom of the Langham with gold light, white flowers, and the low hum of people pretending not to gossip. By 8 o'clock, everyone had heard something. Marcus Hale's funding was unstable. A major investor had withdrawn. City permits were under review. A contractor was threatening to sue. No one knew the full truth, but wealthy people could smell blood even through perfume. Marcus arrived with Vanessa on his arm, smiling too brightly. His tuxedo was perfect, but his skin looked pale under the lights. Vanessa stayed close, whispering through her smile, asking why people were staring. Marcus told her to relax. He told her everything was under control, but his eyes kept moving toward the doors. Then the room quieted, not all at once. Quiet traveled in a wave, beginning near the entrance and moving across the ballroom as heads turned and conversations died. Luca Moretti entered in a black suit, calm as midnight. Isabella walked beside him. For one breath, the ballroom seemed to forget how to breathe. The woman who had been dragged from a dinner party days earlier now moved beneath the chandeliers with Luca's hand resting lightly at her back. The emerald dress glowed against her skin. Her hair fell in soft waves. Diamonds touched her ears, but they did not make her beautiful. They only proved that someone had finally dressed her like the truth. Marcus stared, his mouth parted slightly. His hand slipped from Vanessa's waist. Isabella saw him. For a moment the old pain rose, sharp and familiar. Then Luca leaned down just enough for only her to hear. "Breathe, Isabella." She did. The room watched as Luca guided her forward. People moved aside before him. Mrs. Whitaker appeared near the center of the ballroom, her face pale beneath its careful makeup. She greeted Luca with a trembling smile. "Mr. Moretti," she said, "we weren't aware you would be attending." "I rarely announce myself," Luca replied. His eyes moved to Marcus. Marcus forced a laugh and stepped forward. "Luca," he said too warmly, too quickly, "this is unexpected, is it?" Marcus swallowed. His gaze flicked to Isabella. "I see my wife has been dramatic." The room went still again. Luca smiled faintly. It was not a kind smile. "Choose your next words carefully." Marcus's face tightened. He looked around and saw people watching, waiting. Pride pushed him where wisdom would not. "This is a private matter. Isabella and I had a difficult evening, but she has always been emotional. I'm sure whatever she told you sounded worse than it was." For the first time, Isabella spoke. Her voice was quiet, but clear. "You threw me outside barefoot in the rain." A soft gasp moved through the crowd. Marcus's jaw clenched. "After you made a scene." "No," Isabella said. "After you made me one." Luca lifted one hand. A man behind him stepped forward with a slim folder. Luca took it and held it at his side. "Marcus Hale," Luca said. "Ours $13 million across private loans, delayed construction payments, and investor advances moved through accounts he had no right to touch. His latest project was funded by promises he could not keep, with numbers changed after review and signatures placed on documents that were never properly approved." Marcus went white. "That's absurd. It is documented. You have no right." "I have every right," Luca said. "Some of those funds were connected to people under my protection. Some of those doors opened because I allowed them to open, and all of them are now closed." The ballroom seemed smaller. Marcus looked around for support and found none. Investors who had once laughed at his jokes stared at him like spoiled meat. Mrs. Whitaker stepped back. Vanessa released his arm. Marcus's mask began to crack. "Isabella," he said, turning to her with sudden desperation, "tell them this isn't true." She looked at him for a long moment. This was the voice he used when he needed rescuing. She knew it better than any song. It had pulled her out of sleep at midnight, made her forgive insults, made her explain away his failures, made her hold together a life that cut her hands every time she touched it. "Please," Marcus whispered. "You know me." "Yes," Isabella said. "I do." Hope flashed in his eyes. That hope should have pleased her. Instead, it only made her tired. "You used my love like a ladder," she said. "You climbed as high as you could, and when you thought you were above me, you kicked me away." Marcus stepped closer. Luca's men shifted, but Isabella lifted a hand slightly, stopping them. "I was angry," Marcus said. "I said things. But we can fix this. You don't belong with me. We built this together." "No," Isabella said softly. "I built a life with you. You built a stage for yourself." His voice broke. "Isabella, please. If you say the right thing, they'll listen. Tell them I'm not a thief. Tell them I'm not ruined." She looked at the man she had loved for years and finally saw him clearly. Not as the scared young husband she once fed hope to. Not as the dreamer she protected. Not as the man she kept waiting for. thinking love would return if she was patient enough. She saw a man who only wanted her when she was useful, who only reached for her hand when he was falling. Her heart did not harden. It simply stopped offering itself as a place for him to land. "You threw me away," she said. "Now stay gone." The words moved through the ballroom like a door closing forever. Marcus stared at her, his face folded into anger because shame had nowhere else to go. "You think he loves you," he snapped, pointing at Luca. "You think a man like that sees anything but a debt? You're still the same woman I left outside. He dressed you up, that's all." Luca moved so fast the room barely registered it. One moment he stood beside Isabella. The next he was in front of Marcus, close enough that Marcus stumbled back. "You left her in the cold?" Luca said, his voice low and quiet. "So you will leave my sight the same way." Two of Luca's men took Marcus by the arms. He fought them at first, but panic made him weak. The crowd parted as they pulled him toward the doors. Vanessa did not follow. No one did. Marcus shouted Isabella's name once, then again, each time less like a husband and more like a man calling for a rope that had already been cut. The ballroom doors opened. Cold air swept in from the rainy street outside. Luca's men dragged Marcus down the front steps and left him beneath the same kind of weather he had forced Isabella to walk through. His tuxedo darkened in the rain. His hair fell across his forehead. His polished shoes slipped on the wet stone as he tried to stand. Through the open doors, Isabella watched him look back at her. There was no triumph in her face. Only peace. Luca returned to her side. "Are you all right?" Isabella looked at Marcus one last time. Then she turned away. "I will be." Luca offered his arm. She took it. Behind them, the gala remained silent, but the silence had changed. It was no longer the hungry silence of people waiting for a woman to be humiliated. It was the stunned quiet of people realizing they had watched a queen remember her crown. In the weeks that followed, Marcus Hale disappeared from every room he had once begged to enter. His investors sued. His accounts were frozen. His projects collapsed under the weight of their own lies. Vanessa returned to safer company. Mrs. Whittaker sent flowers to Isabella with a note that Isabella did not bother to answer. Chicago learned quickly, as cities like Chicago always do, that Marcus had not risen by genius alone, and that the woman he called useless had been the one thing standing between him and the truth. Isabella did not become cruel. That surprised some people. They expected revenge to change her into something sharp and bitter. Instead, freedom made her softer in a stronger way. She moved into Luca's world slowly, not as a prisoner, not as a decoration, but as a woman learning the shape of her own power. She sat beside Nico at family dinners. She advised Luca on which charities were real and which were laundering guilt through pretty words. She opened a shelter for women leaving dangerous homes and funded it with money Marcus once thought would build his empire. And Luca watched her become herself, with the quiet wonder of a man who had seen beautiful things before but never anything like her. One evening, months after the gala, Isabella stood on the balcony of Luca's home, looking over the city. The air was cold but not cruel. Lights shimmered along the streets, and somewhere far below, cars moved like sparks through the dark. Luca came up behind her and placed a coat gently over her shoulders. "You always bring me coats," she said. "You keep standing in the cold," he replied. She smiled. It was small but real. "Not anymore." Luca stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. For a while neither of them spoke. They did not need to. The city stretched beneath them, full of secrets, debts, danger, and power. Once Isabella had believed she needed to shrink to survive inside rooms that were never built for her. Now those rooms opened when she entered. Men lowered their voices. Women watched her with curiosity. People who had once looked through her now looked up, but the greatest change was quieter than all of that. When Isabella looked at herself, she no longer saw the woman Marcus had tried to throw away. She saw the hands that had saved a life, the body that had survived shame, the heart that had loved deeply and still found the courage to stop bleeding for someone who enjoyed the wound. Luca turned toward her. "Do you regret it?" She knew what he meant. The gala, Marcus, the choice, the strange road that had brought her here. Isabella looked out over Chicago, calm and bright beneath the night sky. "No," she said. "For the first time, I think I finally came home." Luca took her hand and raised it to his lips, then let the city know. Isabella looked at him, her eyes warm with quiet strength. "Know what? That Isabella Romano is no man's burden, no man's shame, no man's discarded wife." His thumb moved gently over her knuckles. "She is under my protection, beside my family, and above every person who ever mistook her kindness for weakness." A slow smile touched her mouth. "And what does that make me?" Luca's gaze held hers, dark and certain. "The untouchable Queen of Chicago," he said. This time, Isabella did not look away from the words. She accepted them. Not because Luca gave them to her, but because she had earned them in every quiet year she survived, every insult she swallowed, every act of love she gave without being seen. Marcus had thrown her into the rain believing he was ending her story. Instead, he had delivered her to the one man in Chicago, powerful enough to show the world what she had always been. And from that night forward, whenever people whispered Isabella Romano's name, they no longer whispered with pity. They whispered with respect. They whispered with fear. And most of all, they whispered about the woman who was abandoned in the rain and rose from it like a queen. The woman trembling behind O'Connell's diner did not belong in that alley. Everything about her was wrong for a place like that. The rain had soaked her silver hair flat against her face. Her expensive cream coat was stained with dirty water. One pearl earring still clung to her ear, while the other was gone. She stood between a rusted dumpster and a brick wall covered in old posters, shivering so hard her whole body seemed to shake with the wind. In any other part of Chicago, someone might have stopped and wondered who she was. In this alley, on a freezing late October night, most people would have looked away. But Harper Quinn had spent too much of her life being looked past to ever do that to someone else. The diner kitchen door groaned open behind her, spilling warm yellow light into the dark. Harper stepped outside with a black trash bag in one hand and a tired ache deep in her feet. She had been on her shift for almost 12 hours, smiling at rude customers, refilling coffee for men who snapped their fingers at her, and pretending not to hear the cook make jokes about how she never seemed to turn down a staff meal. Her uniform shirt pulled tight across her soft stomach. Her black pants were damp at the hems from spilled mop water. Her cheeks were flushed from the heat of the grill, and her curls were frizzed from steam and rain. She was 30 years old, plus size, exhausted, and used to being treated like furniture. Useful when needed, invisible when not. At first, she thought the shape in the alley was a pile of wet cardboard. Then it moved. Harper froze with the trash bag still in her hand. The older woman lifted her head slowly, and even through the darkness, Harper could see the fear in her eyes. It was not the wild fear of someone drunk or angry. It was worse than that. It was the fear of someone who knew something terrible was coming and had nowhere left to run. "Ma," Harper called softly. The woman flinched. Her thin hand pressed against the brick wall as if the world had tilted under her feet. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was faint, polished, and broken by cold. "Do not call them." Harper looked toward the mouth of the alley, where rain blurred the passing headlights on the street. "Call who?" The woman swallowed, and her hand moved to her chest. Her fingers trembled against a gold brooch shaped like a rose. "Anyone." That answer made Harper's stomach tighten. Chicago at night was never fully quiet, but the alley suddenly felt too still. The diner fans hummed behind her. Somewhere far off, a siren cried and faded. Harper should have gone back inside. She should have told her boss. She should have called the police or an ambulance and let someone else handle it. That was what a smarter woman would have done. That was what a woman with savings, support, and a clean way out would have done. But the older woman swayed. Harper dropped the trash bag and rushed forward just as the woman's knees gave out. She caught her awkwardly, taking most of the woman's weight against her own body. The older woman was cold, far too cold, and shaking under Harper's hands. "Oh my God," Harper breathed. "You're freezing." The woman tried to push away, but she had no strength left. "I cannot go to a hospital." "You might not get a vote on that," Harper said, trying to keep her voice calm even though her heart was pounding. You're soaked through. Are you hurt? No hospital, the woman said again. This time there was panic under the words. Please, they will find me. Harper looked at her more closely. The coat was not just nice. It was the kind of coat Harper had only seen on women who came into the diner by accident after charity events downtown. Her shoes were Italian leather, ruined now by puddles and alley mud. Her hands were soft, with neatly shaped nails and a wedding ring that looked old, heavy, and very real. This woman was not homeless. She was not just lost. She was someone important who had ended up in a place where important people were not supposed to bleed, shiver, or beg strangers for help. What's your name? Harper asked. The woman blinked like the question had to travel a long way to reach her. Isabella. Okay, Isabella. Harper slipped off her own coat, a cheap brown one with a broken zipper, and wrapped it around the woman's shoulders. The cold bit through Harper's diner shirt immediately, but she ignored it. I'm Harper. I'm going to get you somewhere warm. No police, Isabella whispered. I heard you. No hospital. I heard that too. Isabella gripped Harper's wrist with surprising force. Promise me. Harper stared down at that pale hand on her skin. She had been promised very little in her life, and she knew promises could be dangerous things. Still, there was something in Isabella's eyes that stripped the choice right out of her. I promise I won't call anyone unless you stop breathing, Harper said. But if you do that, I'm breaking the promise. For the first time, the older woman gave the smallest hint of a smile. Then her eyes rolled back. Harper nearly cursed loud enough for the whole block to hear. Instead, she pulled Isabella closer, braced her feet on the wet pavement, and half-carried, half-dragged her toward the back lot. Her old blue Chevy sat under a broken security light, looking every bit as tired as Harper felt. The passenger door stuck because of course it did, and Harper had to kick it twice before it opened. She eased Isabella inside, tucked the coat tighter around her, and ran back to grab her purse from the staff hooks inside the diner. Her boss, Ronnie, glanced up from the register. He was chewing gum with his mouth open, his gray hair slicked back with too much gel. Where do you think you're going? You still got side work. There's a woman sick outside, Harper said, grabbing her bag. Ronnie looked her up and down, his mouth twisting. So call somebody. I'm taking her somewhere safe. You leave now. Don't bother coming in tomorrow. Harper stopped with her hand on the door. That threat should have scared her. Rent was due in 9 days. Her fridge had eggs, half a block of cheese, and a bottle of ketchup inside it. Her bank account was a sad little joke waiting to happen. But outside, Isabella was shaking in her car, and the fear in that woman's eyes had not been fake. Harper looked back at Ronnie. Then I guess you'll have to refill your own coffee. She stepped into the rain before he could answer. The drive to Harper's apartment felt longer than it was. Isabella drifted in and out of awareness, mumbling words Harper could not understand. Twice she looked through the rear window with sharp terror, as if expecting headlights to appear behind them. Harper kept both hands tight on the wheel and took side streets instead of the main road, even though she told herself she was being ridiculous. Nobody was following them. This was not a movie. She was a diner waitress with a dying woman in her passenger seat and a car that made a sad grinding sound every time she turned left. If danger was coming, it had probably chosen a better car to chase. Still, she kept checking the mirror. Her apartment was on the second floor of a tired brick building in Avondale, above a closed laundromat that still smelled faintly of detergent and wet concrete. The stairs were narrow, and getting Isabella up them nearly broke Harper's back, but she managed. She got the older woman inside, locked the door, and turned every lamp on, because the room felt less frightening with light in it. The apartment was small, warm, and deeply ordinary. A sagging couch faced a thrift store coffee table. A stack of library books sat beside a mug with chipped blue paint. The kitchen was barely big enough for one person to turn around in. Harper suddenly saw it through Isabella's eyes and felt a deep, hot embarrassment. The cheap curtains, the peeling paint near the window, the laundry basket she had not folded. The size of her life laid bare in one little room. Then Isabella coughed, and Harper forgot to be ashamed. She helped her out of the ruined coat and wet shoes. The dress underneath was dark green silk, soaked and clinging to her frail body. Harper wrapped her in towels, then blankets, then the old quilt her grandmother had made before arthritis stole the strength from her hands. She made tea, found dry socks, and filled a bowl with warm water. Isabella tried to thank her, but the words kept fading. When Harper helped her take the wet scarf from around her neck, she saw the medical bracelet. Heart condition. The words were printed beside a name that made Harper pause. Isabella Rossi. For a moment, Harper did not move. The name sat in the air like a match held too close to gasoline. Rossi was not just a last name in Chicago. Rossi meant whispers, closed restaurants, black cars outside churches, men in perfect suits who did not wait in lines. Harper had heard customers lower their voices when they said it. She had watched cops at the diner go quiet when someone mentioned Matthew Rossi, the man who had taken over his father's empire and turned fear into a business language. Harper looked at Isabella's pale face. "No," she whispered to herself. "Absolutely not." Isabella's breathing hitched. Harper grabbed her phone and searched the medication listed on the bracelet. The first few results made her skin go cold. Isabella needed pills. Not soon. Not tomorrow now. Harper checked the older woman's small purse and found nothing but a soaked handkerchief, a broken phone, a lipstick, and a photo of a young boy with dark eyes standing beside a man in a black suit. There was no medicine. Harper paced once across the room, then twice. She had $47 in her checking account. Payday was 3 days away. Her credit card was nearly maxed out because her car needed repairs and because life had a cruel sense of humor. She looked at Isabella, who was now curled under the quilt with her lips turning faintly blue. "Okay," Harper said, mostly to keep herself from falling apart. "Okay, we're doing this." The all-night pharmacy was 6 blocks away. Harper left Isabella wrapped in blankets with a space heater angled near the couch and ran through the rain so hard her lungs burned. At the pharmacy counter, she explained too fast, begged too openly, and handed over almost everything she had for a small emergency supply of pills after the tired pharmacist took pity on her. By the time Harper got home, her hair was dripping, her shoes were soaked through, and her chest felt tight from the cold. But Isabella was still breathing. Harper gave her the medicine with careful hands. She sat beside her on the couch until the worst of the shaking passed. Sometime after 3 in the morning, Isabella opened her eyes and looked at her with a strange, soft sadness. "You should not have helped me," she whispered. Harper gave a tired laugh. "People keep saying that like I had a meeting about it first. They will come." "Who?" "My son." Harper's smile faded. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "He will not understand." Outside, thunder rolled low over the city. Harper wanted to ask more, but Isabella had already slipped back into restless sleep. So Harper sat on the floor with her back against the couch, wrapped in a thin blanket, watching the rain stripe the window. She should have been terrified. Maybe she was. But there was something else too, something quiet and strange. For the first time in a long time, she felt like her life had cracked open and let something impossible inside. Morning arrived gray and cold. Harper woke to the sound of boots in the hallway. At first she thought she had dreamed it. Then the footsteps stopped outside her door. Her whole body went still. A hard knock shook the frame. Harper pushed herself up, heart punching against her ribs. Isabella stirred on the couch, her face still pale but no longer deathly white. The knock came again, heavier this time. "Open the door." A man's voice, low and controlled, passed through the wood. Harper did not move. The lock exploded inward. The door slammed open so violently it hit the wall and cracked the plaster. 3 men in black coats entered first, all broad shoulders and hard faces, moving with the quiet confidence of men who expected the world to get out of their way. Then he stepped in behind them, Matthew Rossi. Harper knew it without anyone saying his name. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal overcoat that looked too expensive to touch, his black hair neat despite the rain shining on his shoulders. His face was calm in a way that made Harper's blood turn cold. Not angry, not wild, calm, like every violent thing he had ever done had been done with a steady hand and a clear mind. His eyes moved over the room once, taking in the blankets, the medicine bottle, the broken phone on the table, and finally Isabella on the couch. Then his gaze landed on Harper. It was like being pinned to the wall without a hand touching her. "Who are you?" he asked. Harper's mouth went dry. "Harper Quinn." One of the men moved toward Isabella, but Matthew lifted one hand. The man stopped instantly. Matthew walked closer to Harper, slow and silent. She backed up until her hip hit the kitchen counter. She hated herself for the fear rising in her throat, but she could not stop it. This was not a rude customer. This was not Ronnie yelling about side work. This was the kind of man danger obeyed. "You had my mother in your apartment all night," he said. "She was sick. You expect me to believe you found Isabella Rossi in an alley and brought her home out of kindness?" "That's what happened." His expression did not change, but the air did. It grew heavier, colder, harder to breathe. "People do not touch my family by accident," Matthew said. "They do not hide my mother in a rented apartment, buy medicine, and wait quietly for morning. I didn't hide her." Harper's voice shook, and she hated that too. "She begged me not to call anyone." His eyes sharpened. "So you knew who she was?" "Not at first, but you found out." Harper glanced at the medical bracelet on the coffee table. "I saw her name, and then you kept her here. I kept her alive." For the first time, something flickered in Matthew's face. It was gone almost instantly, buried under that smooth, terrifying control. One of his men picked up Harper's purse from the chair and emptied it onto the table. Harper gasped and stepped forward, but another man blocked her path. Her keys, receipts, lip balm and pharmacy slips scattered across the wood. Matthew picked up the receipt and read it. His eyes paused on the total, then on the card number, then on Harper's name. "You spent your own money," he said quietly. "I didn't exactly have time to start a fundraiser." His gaze lifted to hers. There was a dangerous pause, and Harper wondered if her mouth had finally doomed her. Fear did strange things to her. Sometimes it made her quiet. Sometimes it made her stupidly honest. Matthew stepped closer. "Did someone send you?" "No." "Did you call anyone?" "No." "Did you take pictures of her?" "No." "Did you ask her for money?" Harper stared at him, anger finally pushing through the fear. "She was half dead in an alley." "What kind of person do you think I am?" "The kind I meet every day," he said. Grelever, desperate. That word hit too close. Desperate. Harper was desperate. Desperate for rent, for rest, for one day where her body was not treated like a public problem, for a life that did not feel like it was always one bill away from collapse. But she had not helped Isabella because of money. She had helped her because no one else was there. Her eyes burned. "I know I don't look like much to you. I know this place doesn't look like much. But I didn't hurt her. I didn't use her. I gave her my coat. I bought her medicine. I sat up all night making sure she kept breathing. So if you came here looking for someone to punish, you picked the wrong woman." The room went silent. Matthew stared at her. Behind him, Isabella stirred. Her eyes opened slowly. "Matteo." The name left her lips with such tenderness that every man in the room changed. Matthew turned at once, and all that cold power cracked for half a second. He crossed to the couch and knelt beside her, taking her fragile hand in both of his. "Mama," he said, and his voice was no longer the voice of Chicago's most feared man. It was the voice of a son who had almost lost the only soft thing left in his world. Isabella touched his face. "Do not frighten her." Matthew's jaw tightened. "I thought she took you." "No." Isabella's tired eyes moved to Harper. "She saved me." Harper stood frozen near the kitchen, still breathing too fast. Isabella squeezed Matthew's hand. "She gave me her coat. She brought me here. She spent what little she had on medicine. She asked for nothing." Her voice weakened, but she forced the words out. "You will not harm her." Matthew closed his eyes. For a long moment, no one moved. When he opened them again, he looked back at Harper. Something had changed. He was still terrifying, still controlled, still a man made of secrets and blood. But now there was confusion in his gaze, and that somehow made him more dangerous. He looked at her like she was a language he did not know how to read. "In my world," he said, slowly, "kindness is never free." Harper wrapped her arms around herself. "Maybe that's why your world is so miserable." One of his men made a small sound like he had swallowed wrong. Matthew did not look away from Harper. Isabella smiled faintly from the couch. I like her. Matthew rose to his full height. Harper had to tilt her head back to keep eye contact. She expected another threat. Maybe an order. Maybe money tossed at her feet like she was something that could be cleaned up and dismissed. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. He placed it on the coffee table beside the medicine bottle. For the door, he said. The lock, the damage, the trouble. I don't want your money. You will take it. No, I won't. His eyes narrowed slightly. Harper knew she should stop. She knew arguing with a man like Matthew Rossi was probably a very short road to regret. But she was tired, cold, broke, insulted, and still standing in the same damp uniform from yesterday. Matthew studied her for another long second. Then, to her surprise, he took the envelope back, removed a smaller amount of cash, and set that on the table instead. For the door, he said. Nothing else. That was somehow worse. The fact that he had listened. Harper looked away first. His men helped Isabella carefully from the couch and wrapped her in a long black coat one of them had brought. Isabella held Harper's hand before leaving. You have a good heart, she whispered. Harper swallowed against the sudden tightness in her throat. You scared me half to death. I am sorry. Don't do it again. Isabella's smile warmed for one brief second. I will try. Matthew watched the exchange with a strange expression. Then his mother was guided toward the broken door, and the apartment began to empty of dark coats, heavy boots, and quiet danger. Matthew paused at the threshold. Do not speak about this, he said. Harper gave a tired nod. Trust me, I don't want to be connected to whatever this is. His gaze moved over her face, not quickly, not rudely, but with unsettling focus, like he was memorizing something he had not meant to notice. You already are, he said. Then he left. The silence after him felt enormous. Harper stood in the middle of her apartment, staring at the ruined door, the damp towels, the quilt on the couch, and the money on the table. Her hands began to shake only after everyone was gone. She sank onto the couch and laughed once, soft and humorless, because crying felt too obvious and screaming would bother the neighbors. By noon, a man she had never seen before came to fix her door. He did not ask for payment. By evening, Ronnie called and told her there had been a misunderstanding, and of course she still had her job. His voice shook the whole time. The next morning, the landlord slipped a note under her door saying her rent would not be raised after all. At the diner, customers who usually talked down to her suddenly said, "Please and thank you." A man who had once snapped his fingers for more coffee lowered his eyes when Harper came near. That was when she saw the first black car. It sat across the street from O'Connell's with its engine running and its windows too dark to see through. Harper told herself it was nothing. Then it was there again after her shift. Then again outside her apartment. Then beside the bus stop. Always far enough away to pretend it was not following her. Always close enough to remind her that pretending did not make it true. Matthew Rossi had walked out of her apartment, but he had not walked out of her life. And as Harper stood under the weak glow of the diner sign on another cold Chicago night, watching that black car wait in the rain, she understood the soft, terrible truth settling over her bones. She had saved the wrong woman, or maybe, somehow, the right one. The black car waited in the rain like a quiet warning. Harper stood beneath the weak red glow of O'Connell's Diner's sign, her purse hugged against her chest, the smell of coffee and fried onions still clinging to her uniform. Across the street, the tinted windows reflected nothing but streaks of water and passing headlights. She could not see the driver. She could not see anyone inside. But she knew, deep in the nervous place beneath her ribs, that someone inside was watching her. Not staring the way men at the diner sometimes stared when they thought she would not notice. Not judging her body or her tired face, or the way her shoes pinched after a long shift. This was different. This was the steady attention of people who had been ordered not to blink. Harper told herself to walk home like normal. She told herself not to look afraid. But every step down the sidewalk felt heavy, and the city around her felt changed. The same corner store buzzed with fluorescent light. The same old man smoked outside the pawn shop. The same train rattled in the distance, shaking the wet pavement under her feet. Yet everything had a shadow now. Every parked car looked like it might hold a gun. Every man in a dark coat seemed to turn his head a little too slowly. By the time she reached her apartment, Harper's hands were stiff with cold and worry. The black car rolled past once, slow and silent, then disappeared around the block. For 3 days the protection followed her like a ghost. At first, Harper tried to ignore it. Then she tried to outrun it, taking side streets, switching bus stops, leaving work through the back alley. It did not matter. There was always a car. Always a man across the street pretending to check his phone. Always the strange feeling that the city had wrapped invisible wire around her life. People treated her differently, too. Ronnie stopped yelling. Customers stopped snapping their fingers. A woman who had laughed at Harper's uniform last week suddenly called her sweetheart and tipped $20 on a coffee. It would have been funny if it did not make Harper want to crawl out of her own skin. She lasted until Friday night. The diner was nearly empty, with only 2 truck drivers at the counter and a young couple sharing pancakes in the corner booth. Rain tapped against the windows, softer than before, almost polite. Harper was wiping down a table when Ronnie came out of the office looking pale. He held the phone away from his ear like it had bitten him. "For you," he said. Harper frowned. "Who is it?" Ronnie swallowed. "Just take it." She took the phone slowly. "Hello?" Matthew Rossi's voice came through low and calm. "Go into the kitchen now." The cloth slipped from Harper's hand. She looked toward the front window. Across the street, the black car was gone. "What?" "Do not argue with me, Harper. Walk into the kitchen and get away from the windows." A cold pressure closed around her chest. "Why?" The bell above the diner door jingled. 2 men stepped inside. They were not regulars. Harper knew that immediately. They were too still, too focused. One wore a baseball cap low over his face. The other kept one hand tucked inside his jacket. Their eyes moved over the room, passed over the truck drivers, skipped Ronnie, and landed on Harper. Matthew's voice sharpened. "Harper." She dropped the phone and ran. The first gunshot shattered the front window. Screams tore through the diner. Glass exploded across the floor like ice. Harper slipped near the kitchen door, caught herself on the counter, and threw herself behind the steel prep table just as another shot punched through the wall where her head had been. The cook shouted something. Ronnie fell flat behind the register. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, bitter and unreal. Then the back door burst open. Men in black flooded the kitchen, moving fast and hard. Harper barely had time to gasp before one of them grabbed her around the waist and pulled her behind him. She fought on instinct, kicking and twisting until he said, "Rossi sent us." That did not make her calmer. It only made the nightmare clearer. The sounds in the diner became sharp and broken. A shout, a crash, a heavy thud, the deep bark of orders. Harper crouched on the greasy kitchen floor with her hands over her ears, her whole body shaking so violently she thought she might be sick. She had not done anything. She had not stolen from anyone. She had not lied or betrayed or asked to matter. She had helped a sick woman in an alley, and somehow that small kindness had opened a door into a world where people bled over breakfast menus and men with guns knew her name. A familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Where is she, Matthew?" Harper lifted her head. He came through the kitchen doorway like a storm dressed in black. His coat was open, rain shining on his shoulders, his face colder than she had ever seen it. One of his men spoke to him, but Matthew ignored him. His eyes found Harper on the floor, and for one brief second the terrifying calm in him cracked. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and crouched in front of her. "Are you hit?" he asked. Harper stared at him. "Am I hit? Answer me." "No." Her voice broke. "No, I'm not hit, but someone shot at me in a diner, Matthew." His jaw tightened when she said his name, like hearing it from her mouth affected him in a way he did not want to admit. "They were Morelli men, a rival family. They found out you helped my mother." "I helped your mother. I didn't join your war, I know." "No, you don't know." Harper pushed herself up, anger rising through the fear, because anger was easier to stand on. "You put men on me. You scared my boss. You changed things around me like I was some problem you could manage. And now people are shooting through windows because of you." Matthew stood with her, close enough that she could see rain on his lashes. "Because of me, you are alive. Because of you, I had to be saved in the first place." The kitchen went silent around them. No one spoke to Matthew Rossi like that. Harper could feel every man in the room waiting for his reaction. But Matthew did not shout. He did not threaten her. He simply looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Then he said, "You are coming with me." "No." "Yes, no, Matthew. You do not get to break into my life and start making choices for me." His voice dropped. "If I leave you here, they will come again. And next time they will not miss." Harper wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him he was wrong. But the shattered front window glittered across the tile. The truck drivers were still shaking. Ronnie was crying behind the counter. The bullet hole in the wall near the kitchen door sat at the exact height of Harper's face. Matthew saw her look at it. His voice softened just slightly. "I am not asking because I want control. I am asking because if you die because of my family, my mother will never forgive me." Harper let out a bitter little laugh. "So this is about Isabella." His eyes did not move from hers, at first. The words landed between them, quiet and dangerous. Harper looked away first. Matthew took off his coat and placed it around her shoulders before she could stop him. It was warm from his body, heavy and expensive and dark with rain. Harper hated that her fingers closed around the edges of it. She hated even more that part of her wanted to lean into the warmth. The ride to the Rossi estate was silent. Harper sat in the back of an armored car with Matthew beside her and two men in front. Chicago slitted past in wet streaks of light, then faded into quieter streets and gated roads. The city seemed to fall away, leaving only the hum of the engine and the steady pressure of Matthew's presence beside her. He did not touch her. He did not try to explain. He only watched the road ahead like he could threaten the future into behaving. The estate rose out of the darkness behind iron gates and stone walls, huge and pale under the rain. Harper stared through the window as the car rolled up a long driveway lined with bare trees. The house looked less like a home and more like a secret that had learned how to stand still. Marble steps, tall windows, guards at every entrance, warm light behind thick glass. It was beautiful in the way a locked jewelry case was beautiful. Safe for what was inside. Impossible for anything else. Harper stepped out of the car and immediately felt out of place. Her diner shoes squeaked against the marble floor. Her uniform smelled like grease, smoke, and fear. A maid with silver hair glanced at her, then quickly looked away. A man near the staircase looked her over with the kind of silent judgment Harper knew too well. Too big, too ordinary, too soft for a world this polished and cruel. Matthew saw it. His voice cut across the foyer. "Anyone who makes her feel unwelcome answers to me." The room went still. Harper's cheeks burned. "I don't need you to threaten people into being nice to me." "No," Matthew said, looking at the man near the stairs until he lowered his eyes. "You deserve it without the threat, but I know my house." Before Harper could answer, Isabella appeared at the top of the staircase. She looked fragile but far better than the night in the alley. Her silver hair was brushed neatly. A soft blue shawl covered her shoulders. When she saw Harper, her face warmed with real joy, and that warmth did what all the marble and guards could not. It made the house feel almost human. "My brave girl," Isabella said. Harper's throat tightened. "You look better. Because of you." Isabella came down slowly, with Matthew moving toward her at once, but she waved him off with a mother's impatience. She reached Harper and took both of her hands. "I asked him to bring you where you would be safe." Harper glanced at Matthew. "He has a funny way of asking." Isabella smiled. "My son has many flaws. Being gentle with fear is one of them." Matthew looked away, but not fast enough to hide the flicker of pain in his expression. That first night in the estate felt endless. Harper was shown to a bedroom larger than her entire apartment, with cream walls, thick rugs, and a bed so soft she sat on the edge of it like it might reject her. Someone brought clothes in her size, not shapeless or ugly, but warm sweaters, dark pants, soft sleepwear, all new. That made her uncomfortable in a way she could not explain. She was used to making do, not being considered. She was used to squeezing herself into things that almost fit and pretending it did not hurt. She did not sleep much. Over the next few days, the golden cage became harder to hate, not because Harper forgave Matthew for dragging her there, but because Isabella made it impossible to stay completely angry. The older woman asked Harper to join her for tea, then for lunch, then for slow walks through the glass garden room where rain slid down the windows and winter roses bloomed under warm lamps. Isabella told stories about Chicago before Harper was born, about arriving from Italy as a young bride, about loving a dangerous man and raising a son who learned too young that love was something enemies could use against you. Matthew was not born cold, Isabella said one afternoon, her voice soft over the clink of china. He became cold because warmth kept being taken from him. Harper watched rain bead on the glass ceiling. That doesn't give him the right to control everyone. No, Isabella said. It only explains why he tries. Matthew remained distant at first. He came and went at strange hours. Sometimes Harper saw him through open doors, speaking quietly with men who looked afraid to breathe wrong. Sometimes he joined dinner and said very little, though his eyes followed Harper whenever she reached for a glass or laughed at something Isabella said. It should have made her uncomfortable. It did make her uncomfortable. But beneath it was another feeling, one Harper did not want to name. He looked at her as if she mattered, not because she was thin, not because she was polished, not because she knew how to move through his world with practiced grace. He watched her argue with him about locking the garden doors. He watched her bring Isabella an extra blanket without being asked. He watched her tell one of his guards to stop hovering because Isabella was a grown woman, not a museum vase. And each time his expression shifted a little more, as if Harper kept surprising him simply by refusing to be small. One evening, Harper found him alone in the library, standing near the fireplace with a glass he had not touched. The room smelled like old books, smoke, and rain. She should have turned around. Instead, she stepped inside. "Your mother fell asleep early," she said. "I know. Of course you know. There are probably 3 men outside her door listening to her breathe." His mouth almost curved. Almost. 2. Harper folded her arms. "That was not an invitation to be proud of yourself." Matthew looked into the fire. "You think I am a monster? I think you are a man who learned to survive by becoming one." He turned then, and the honesty in his face startled her more than the coldness ever had. "There is no clean way to hold power in my world. Maybe not. But there are still choices." "You say that like choices are easy." "No," Harper said quietly. "I say that because they're hard." Something passed between them then, a quiet thread pulled tight. Matthew looked at her diner-worn hands, her soft body wrapped in a borrowed sweater, her tired eyes that still refused to lower for him. He stepped closer, not enough to trap her, just enough for the firelight to touch both their faces. "You saved my mother when you had every reason not to get involved," he said. "You spent money you needed. You gave her your coat in the rain." "Why?" Harper shrugged, but the movement felt too small for the question. "Because she was cold." "That is not an answer. It's the only one I have." Harper looked up at him. "Not everything is strategy, Matthew. Sometimes someone is hurting and you help." His gaze moved over her face slowly. "In my life, that kind of softness gets people killed." Harper's voice softened too. Then, "Maybe you've been calling it softness because you don't know what courage looks like when it isn't holding a gun." The fire snapped. Matthew stared at her like she had touched a wound he kept hidden under his ribs. Then he reached out, slowly enough for her to pull away. She did not. His fingers brushed a loose curl back from her cheek. The touch was careful, almost uncertain, and that made her breath catch. "You should be afraid of me," he whispered. "I am." His hand stilled. Harper swallowed. But not only afraid, the words changed something. Matthew leaned closer, his eyes dropping to her mouth, then lifting again as if asking a question he did not know how to say. Harper could have stepped back. She should have. Instead, she stayed. His lips touched hers gently at first, almost impossibly gentle for a man like him. Then the restraint broke. The kiss deepened, slow and consuming, filled with all the things neither of them knew how to speak. Harper's hands rose to his chest, feeling the hard beat of his heart under her palms. For once, she did not wonder if she was too much. In Matthew's arms, she felt like something solid in a world built on lies. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "You are not a weakness," he said, voice rough. "Do you understand me?" Harper closed her eyes. "I'm not sure I understand anything anymore. The attack came 2 nights later. It began with the lights going out. One moment, the estate glowed with warm gold lamps and quiet order. The next, darkness swallowed the halls. A second later, alarms screamed through the house. Harper had been in Isabella's sitting room, helping her choose a scarf. When the windows shook with the distant sound of gunfire, Isabella went pale. Harper's blood turned cold. "Stay here." "No, Harper. Lock the door." She did not wait for an answer. The hallway outside was chaos. Guards ran past her. Red emergency lights flashed against marble walls. "Somewhere below," men shouted. Harper moved on instinct, staying low, her bare feet silent against the rug. She did not know where Matthew was, only that every part of her needed to find him. At the top of the main staircase, she saw him. Matthew was in the foyer below, one hand pressed to his side, blood dark between his fingers. 2 of his men were down, another fought near the doors, and beside Matthew stood Victor, the quiet security chief Harper had seen every day since arriving. The man who checked the gates, the man who nodded politely at Isabella, the man Matthew trusted. Victor raised his gun toward Matthew's head. Harper did not think. For 30 years, the world had told her her body was something to hide, something to shrink, something to apologize for. It had told her she was too heavy, too wide, too much. In that one blazing second, all the old shame burned into something fierce and bright. She ran down the stairs. Victor turned at the sound, but not fast enough. Harper hit him with everything she had. Her shoulder slammed into his chest. Her weight drove him backward. The gun fired into the ceiling as they crashed into a marble table, sending a vase exploding across the floor. Pain flashed through Harper's side, but she held on, grabbing his arm, twisting with a desperate strength she did not know she had. Victor cursed and shoved her, but Harper planted her feet and drove her knee into his stomach. He stumbled. Matthew moved. The sound that followed was short and final. Victor dropped to the floor. The gun slid across the marble and stopped near Harper's hand. Silence fell in pieces, broken only by the alarm and Harper's ragged breathing. Matthew stood a few feet away, pale from blood loss, staring at her like the whole world had shifted under him. "You saved me," he said. Harper's hands shook. "You're bleeding. You saved me. Matthew, you are bleeding." His men rushed in then, and the estate came alive again. Orders flew. The remaining attackers were taken down. The gates were sealed. Isabella appeared at the staircase despite everyone's attempts to keep her away, her hand pressed to her mouth as she saw Harper standing barefoot in the ruined foyer, glass around her feet, blood on her sweater, and Matthew still alive because of her. By morning, the rival family was finished. Harper did not ask for details. She did not want them. She only knew that the estate had gone quiet again, not peaceful but safe. Matthew survived the gunshot. The doctor stitched him in his private study while he refused pain medicine and kept his eyes on Harper the entire time. Isabella cried when she hugged her. One of the guards, a man who had barely looked at Harper all week, lowered his head when she passed. Respect, Harper realized, felt nothing like attention. Attention could still be cruel. Respect had weight. It made space around her, but when the danger passed, fear of a different kind moved in. 3 days after the attack, Harper packed the clothes she had arrived in. Her diner uniform had been washed and folded by someone in the house. The sight of it on the bed made her chest ache. That was her real life. Coffee stains, tired feet, rent notices, a world that had overlooked her, yes, but a world she understood. Matthew's world had marble floors and blood under them. It had devotion, but it also had enemies. It had Isabella's warmth, but it had locked gates too. She was zipping her small bag when Matthew appeared in the doorway. "You are leaving," he said. Harper did not turn around. "The danger is over." "No, the rival family is gone. Victor is dead. Your mother is safe. You're safe." "Harper," she closed her eyes at the sound of her name. "I don't belong here." Matthew stepped into the room slowly. Who told you that? She laughed softly, but it hurt. Look around, I am. No, Matthew. Really look. Women in your world look like they were made in expensive rooms. They know what fork to use and how to wear silk without feeling like a fraud. I'm a waitress from a diner with one good bra and a car that barely starts. I don't know how to be whatever this is. He came closer. I do not want whatever this is. I want you. For now. His expression hardened, but not with anger, with pain. You think I would go back to women who fear me, flatter me, and want my name on their credit cards after knowing you? Harper's throat tightened. Matthew stopped in front of her. You saved my mother before you knew who she was. You stood up to me in your kitchen when armed men surrounded you. You made my house warmer in 1 week than it has been in years. You saw the ugliest parts of my world and still ran toward danger when I was about to die. My trained men failed. My trusted guard betrayed me. You did not. Harper looked down. That doesn't make me a queen. Matthew touched her chin, lifting her face gently. No, it means you already were one. I was simply too blind to know what I was looking at. Her eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. I'm scared, I know. I'm scared I'll lose myself here. Then I will spend the rest of my life making sure you do not. His voice lowered. Stay because you choose it. Not because I demand it. Not because danger forced you here. Stay because this house is better with you in it. Because my mother loves you. Because I love you. The words settled over the room like dawn. Harper stared at him. Matthew Rossi, the man Chicago feared, looked more vulnerable in that moment than he had when bleeding in the foyer. You love me? She whispered. Yes, you barely know how to ask for toast without sounding like a threat. His mouth curved faintly. I will work on that. A laugh broke through her tears. It was small, shaky, and real. Matthew pulled her close, carefully because of his wound, and Harper let herself lean into him. Not because she had no other choice. Not because she had been rescued. But because for the first time, staying did not feel like shrinking. It felt like stepping forward. Weeks later, Harper returned to O'Connell's diner one last time. Not in her old uniform, but in a deep green coat Isabella had chosen for her and boots that did not hurt her feet. Matthew waited outside in the car because Harper had insisted on going in alone. Ronnie nearly dropped a plate when he saw her. The regulars went quiet. The same counter, the same coffee smell, the same cracked red stools. But Harper did not feel invisible anymore. She picked up her final paycheck, said goodbye to the cook, and left Ronnie with a look that made him apologize without being asked. Outside, Matthew opened the car door for her. Across the street, the winter sun broke through the clouds, pale and cold over Chicago. Isabella waited at the estate with tea, a warm smile, and a place set for Harper at the family table. Not at the edge, not hidden near the kitchen, beside Matthew. Over time, people in the city learned her name. Some called her the waitress who saved Isabella Rossi. Some called her Matthew's weakness. They only made that mistake once. The people closest to the Rossi family knew better. Harper was not a weakness. She was the quiet force that had walked out of the rain and changed the heart of a house built on fear. She did not become cruel. She did not become polished into someone unrecognizable. She still laughed too loudly at Isabella's stories. She still carried snacks in her purse. She still believed kindness mattered, even in a world that punished it. But now, when she entered a room, no one looked past her. Matthew would watch from beside her, proud and silent, as men twice her size lowered their eyes with respect. Isabella would smile like she had known all along. And Harper, who had once believed her body made her invisible, finally understood the truth. She had never been too much. She had been powerful enough to take up space in a world that wanted her small. She had saved a mother, broken a traitor, challenged a don, and taught the most feared man in Chicago that love did not have to be a weakness. It could be the one thing strong enough to save him. And on cold nights, when rain tapped against the tall windows of the Rossi estate, Harper sometimes thought back to that alley behind O'Connell's diner. She remembered the shivering woman in the ruined cream coat. She remembered the choice that had changed everything. She had believed she was saving a stranger. But in the end, Isabella had found her too. The invisible waitress was gone. In her place stood Harper Quinn, the woman who walked into danger with a borrowed coat, a brave heart, and nothing to prove to anyone. And beside Matthew Rossi, with Isabella's hand proudly resting over hers, she claimed her place not as a rescued woman, not as a prisoner in a golden cage, but as the queen who had chosen her throne. Nobody at the Bella Vita Opera House noticed the woman carrying the broken gowns, not the senators laughing under the gold balconies, not the actresses posing near the marble stairs, not the millionaires hiding their sins behind crystal glasses and bright smiles. They noticed the silk, they noticed the diamonds, they noticed the cameras, the champagne, the masks painted with silver feathers and tiny black stones, but they did not notice Mara Bellamy, because Mara had learned a long time ago that poor women were only seen when someone needed someone to blame. The charity masquerade was supposed to be the most beautiful night of the year. Outside, black cars slid up to the curb like shadows with headlights, letting out women in gowns that cost more than Mara made in 6 months, and men whose faces appeared on news channels whenever money needed a friendly smile. Inside, the old opera house glowed like a palace. The ceiling was painted with angels. The stage curtains hung in heavy red folds. Music drifted from a string quartet near the grand staircase, soft enough to sound expensive and sad enough to make people feel important. Every corner smelled like white roses, polished wood, perfume, and the faint cold fear that always followed powerful people when they gathered in one room. Mara moved through all of it with a sewing kit in one hand and a rack of costume pieces in the other. Her black worker's dress pulled tight across her stomach when she bent. Her shoes pinched her feet. Her curls were pinned back so quickly that one dark strand kept slipping loose against her cheek. She had been there since early morning, steaming gowns, sewing beads back onto sleeves, fixing a torn zipper on a celebrity's dress, while the woman talked over her as if Mara were part of the furniture. That was the way the rich liked their workers. Quiet, useful, invisible. Mara was not invisible because she was small. She was soft and full-bodied, with thick arms, wide hips, and a face that still held a quiet kind of sweetness, no matter how tired she was. But the world had a strange way of looking straight at a woman like her and deciding she did not count. Men moved around her, as if she took up too much room. Women with sharp cheekbones and sharper tongues smiled at her in a way that made her feel like an apology. Tonight was no different. A guest had already asked if she was allowed near the designer gowns with those hands. Another had laughed when Mara knelt to fix a hem and whispered that the opera house must be hiring anybody now. Mara had swallowed all of it. She always did. There were bills waiting at home, and Toby needed medicine, and medicine did not care about pride. Her younger brother had been born with a weak heart, and a smile so bright it made every hospital room feel less grey. He was 17 now, tall and thin from too many treatments, but he still called Mara his brave one, even though she never felt brave. Brave people had choices. Mara had rent, debt, and a phone that made her chest tighten every time the hospital number flashed across the screen. Near the stage, the costume display had been set up like a dream. Pearl masks, velvet cloaks, jeweled gloves, old opera dresses under glass, all borrowed from private collectors for the evening. A young intern named Lila was arranging a tray of pearl strands beside the display, her hands careful but shaking. She was a small girl with nervous eyes, wearing a plain black dress and a little gold locket at her throat. Mara had noticed her earlier, not because Lila looked important, but because Lila kept saying thank you to the workers. That alone made her stand out in a room where kindness was rarer than diamonds. Then the tray slipped. It was not a loud sound at first, just a soft scatter, like rain made of glass. Pearls rolled across the polished floor, bouncing under the stage lights, slipping between shoes that cost enough to feed families. Lila gasped and dropped to her knees at once, trying to gather them before anyone saw. But someone had seen. Vivian Caro turned from the circle of donors around her. The room seemed to change temperature. Vivian was the kind of woman people called elegant, because they were too afraid to call her cruel. She was tall and thin, wrapped in pale silver satin that made her look like a blade. Her blonde hair was swept up under a diamond mask, and her mouth held a smile that never reached her eyes. She was the hostess of the masquerade, the wife of Roland Caro, a casino owner with clean cufflinks and dirty money. Everyone knew the Caros were in trouble. Everyone knew tonight mattered, but no one said it out loud, because rich people had a talent for pretending the floor was not cracking beneath them. "What did you do?" Vivian asked. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. People turned. Cameras turned. Lila froze on the floor with pearls in her open hands. "I'm sorry," Lila whispered. "I can fix it. You can fix it," Vivian repeated, taking one slow step closer. "You can fix being useless in front of half the city?" A few guests laughed softly, the kind of laugh people used when they wanted to be close to power. Lila's face went white. She tried to stand, but Vivian grabbed her by the arm, fingers tight enough to leave marks. "Do you know what these pieces are worth?" Vivian hissed. "Do you know whose evening you just embarrassed?" Lila shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "Please, I didn't mean..." Vivian shoved her. It happened fast, but the room watched slowly. Lila stumbled backward, hit the edge of the stage, and fell hard to the floor. Her little gold locket snapped from her neck and skidded across the marble, spinning once before coming to rest near the toe of Adrian Caro's polished shoe. Adrian laughed. He was Vivian's son, handsome in the careless way of boys who had never feared consequences. He wore a black mask pushed up on his forehead and held his phone out in front of him, already live streaming. "Looks like the charity entertainment finally started," he said, grinning at his screen. "Everybody say hello to the disaster intern." More phones rose. That was the part that made Mara's stomach turn, not the shove, not even Vivian's voice. It was the phones. It was the way people did not move to help the girl on the floor. They moved to get a better angle. A senator's wife lifted her champagne higher, so it would not spill while she laughed. A man with a red pocket square stepped over Lila's hand, as if she were a dropped napkin. Someone whispered that poor girls should not be trusted near valuable things. Lila reached for the locket, but Adrian placed one shiny shoe beside it, not touching it, just close enough to make her stop. Mara felt something old and tired rise in her chest. She thought about Toby in his hospital bed. She thought about every manager who had spoken to her like she was slow because her body was large. She thought about all the times she had lowered her eyes because she needed the job. She thought about how easy it was for people with money to turn another human being into a joke. Then she stepped forward. The sound of her shoes on the marble was small, but in her own ears it felt like thunder. She crossed the open space, bent down, and picked up the broken locket before Adrian could stop her. The gold chain lay split in her palm, delicate and warm from Lila's skin. Mara turned her back on the watching crowd and offered her free hand to the girl. "Come on, sweetheart," Mara said softly. "You're okay." Lila stared at her like she had just been pulled from deep water. She took Mara's hand. Mara helped her stand, then placed the locket gently into her trembling fingers. Vivienne's smile vanished. "And who are you supposed to be?" she asked. Mara looked at her. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her throat, but her voice stayed quiet. "Someone who still knows how to help a person off the floor." A murmur moved through the room. Not loud, not brave, just surprised. Vivienne stepped closer, her silver gown whispering against the marble. Her eyes swept over Mara's body, slow and mean, pausing at her stomach, her hips, her cheap uniform, the loose thread near her sleeve. "You work in wardrobe," she said. "That means you touch the dresses, not the guests. Don't confuse proximity with importance." Mara felt the words land. They were designed to hurt, Vivian had probably spent her whole life learning where to cut. "I'm not confused," Mara said. "I know exactly what I am." Adrian turned his phone toward her. "Oh, this is getting good." Vivian's mouth curled. "Do you? Because from where I stand, you are a fat little wardrobe girl who forgot her place in a room full of people who actually matter." The laugh that followed was bigger this time. It rolled through the room like something dirty. Mara felt heat crawl up her neck. She knew what they saw. A poor woman in worn shoes, a body they thought gave them permission to speak, a worker who should have stayed bent over torn hems and broken zippers. Her hands tightened around Lila's shoulder, but she did not step back. "Expensive gowns can make people look beautiful from far away," Mara said. "They cannot hide what is ugly up close." The room went still. For one strange second, no one laughed. Even Adrian's grin faltered. Lila looked at Mara with wide, wet eyes. Somewhere near the front row, the string quartet missed a note, the soft music bending out of shape. Vivian's face changed. The cruelty did not leave it. It sharpened. "You think that was clever?" she asked. "No," Mara said. "I think it was true." Vivian lifted one hand, and two security guards moved from the side doors. Big men in black suits, trained to follow money before conscience. "Remove them," Vivian said. "Both of them. And do not take them through the service hall. Take them through the main doors. Let everyone see what happens when trash forgets it is trash." Lila began to shake again. Mara turned her gently toward the exit. She wanted to leave before this became worse, before the job disappeared, before the hospital called again, before her courage cost her something she could not afford. But Vivian stepped into their path. "No," Vivian said, smiling again. "Slowly. I want them to understand the lesson." Adrian moved closer, phone held high. "Wave to the viewers," he said. "Tell them how it feels to get thrown out of a charity gala." Then Lila's phone rang. The small sound sliced through the thick silence. Lila flinched so hard she almost dropped it. She looked down at the screen, and whatever she saw made the blood drain from her face. Mara saw only one name before Lila rejected the call. Nico. Adrian noticed too. "Nico?" he said, laughing. "What is that? Your secret prince? Did the poor little intern invent a boyfriend to come save her?" More laughter. Lila shoved the phone into her pocket, eyes lowered, lips pressed together like she was holding in something dangerous. Before Mara could ask her anything, Mara's own phone began to ring. She knew the sound before she saw the screen. St. Agnes Medical Center. Everything inside her went cold. She stepped away from Lila, turning slightly from the crowd as she answered. "This is Mara." The nurse on the other end spoke gently, which made it worse. Toby's condition had changed. His heart was struggling. The doctors did not want to wait until morning. They had a surgical team ready tonight, but the remaining payment still had to be cleared before the procedure could begin. They were sorry. They knew Mara had been trying. They knew she had already paid so much. Mara's hand went numb around the phone. The opera house blurred. The lights became stars behind water. She heard herself ask how much was still owed, even though some part of her already knew the number would be impossible. When the nurse answered, Mara closed her eyes. For the first time that night, her calm cracked. She had worked until her feet swelled. She had skipped meals. She had sewn costumes by day and cleaned offices by night. She had sold her mother's bracelet, her winter coat, and almost every small thing her father had left behind. Still, it was not enough. It was never enough. Toby was lying in a hospital bed across the city, waiting for a surgery that could save him, and Mara was standing under gold ceilings while strangers laughed at the shape of her body. The shame of it nearly brought her to her knees. Vivian watched her face with slow satisfaction. "Trouble at home?" she asked sweetly. "How sad. Perhaps next time you will remember not to risk employment for a girl who drops pearls." Mara lowered the phone. Her breath came in shallow pulls. She wanted to answer. She wanted to say something brave, but fear had wrapped both hands around her throat. And in that fear, the past opened. 7 years earlier, on a stormy night near the docks, Mara had been working alone at a small laundromat with flickering lights and machines that groaned like tired animals. Rain slapped the windows, thunder shook the street. She had been closing late, counting the little money she had saved for rent, when she heard a sound behind the building. At first, she thought it was a stray dog. Then she found the man. He was slumped beside the back wall, bleeding through a torn shirt, soaked from the rain, his face pale beneath dark hair. He tried to raise a hand when she came close, but he was too weak. Mara should have run. Every smart part of her told her to lock the door and call the police. But there were voices down the street, rough voices, men searching through the storm. The wounded man looked at her once, and in his eyes she saw no power, no threat, no name, only pain. So she dragged him inside. He was heavy, and she was crying by the time she got him behind the washers. She cleaned his wounds with towels and cheap first aid supplies from the office. She gave him water, then soup from her own thermos. When the men came to the front window and asked if she had seen anyone, Mara shook her head and kept her body between them and the back room. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the counter to hide it. By dawn, the stranger could stand. He asked her name. She told him only Mara. He asked why she helped him. She said because he was dying, and she had not yet learned how to walk away from that. Before he left, she pressed her rent money into his hand, then unclipped the silver saint medal her father had worn before he died. The stranger tried to refuse it, but Mara closed his fingers around it. "Sell it if you have to," she had told him. "Just live." The next morning, the laundromat owner found the missing cash and supplies. Mara was accused of stealing. She could have told the truth. She could have said a wounded man had been there, that men had been hunting him, that she had saved a life. But if she spoke, those men might find him, so she stayed silent. She lost the job, then her name. People near the docks began calling her a thief. After that, good work became hard to find. Every interview ended when someone made a call. Every landlord asked for more money up front. Every year since then, Mara had told herself that kindness was still worth it. But tonight, standing beneath the painted angels of the Bella Vita Opera House, with Toby's life hanging by a bill she could not pay, she wondered if kindness had only taught the world how to take from her. The security guards stepped closer. Lila clung to Mara's sleeve. Vivian smiled for Adrian's camera. Then the great doors of the opera house opened. A cold hush passed through the room before anyone spoke. It started at the back, near the entrance, where the guests turned one by one and forgot how to breathe. Phones lowered. Laughter died. Even the music stopped, one violin note fading into nothing. A man entered beneath the chandelier light, dressed in black, with a face the city knew even if no one dared say his name too loudly. Nico Moretti had arrived. Nico Moretti did not need to raise his voice to make a room afraid. He only had to enter it. The Bella Vita Opera House had been loud only seconds before, full of laughter, whispers, music, and the soft, cruel thrill of people enjoying someone else's pain. But when Nico stepped beneath the great chandelier, every sound seemed to fold into silence. The guests nearest the doors moved away without being told. Men who had spent their lives believing money made them untouchable suddenly found something interesting on the floor. Women in diamond masks lowered their phones. Even Adrian Caro, who had been smiling into his live stream like a boy born without shame, slowly brought the camera down as if his hand had forgotten how to hold it. Nico moved through the crowd with 3 men behind him, but somehow he seemed more dangerous than all of them together. He wore a black suit cut so perfectly it looked less like clothing and more like armor. His dark hair was brushed back from a face that might have been handsome in another life if it had not been made so cold by power. There was no rush in his walk, no anger in his expression. That made it worse. Angry men could be reasoned with, sometimes. A calm man with Nico Moretti's name behind him was something else entirely. Vivian Caro's husband, Roland, hurried forward from near the champagne table. His smile looked weak and wet. "Mr. Moretti," he said, spreading his hands as if welcoming an honored guest instead of a storm. "We were beginning to worry you had been delayed. The private room is ready whenever you are. We have everything prepared for the discussion." Nico did not look at him. He walked past Roland as if the man were a coat rack. He walked past Vivian, past the donors, past the celebrities pretending they had not been laughing. His eyes stayed fixed on the girl near the stage, the young intern with tears on her face and a broken gold chain clutched in her fingers. Lila seemed to shrink when she saw him. Her lips trembled. "Nico," she whispered. The name moved through the room like a match dropped onto dry paper. Nico stopped in front of her. For one strange second, the most feared man in the city looked at no one else. He looked only at Lila. His cold face softened in a way so sudden that Mara almost forgot to breathe. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Lila tried to answer, but her mouth folded and she began to cry. Nico reached out, gentle as a man touching something breakable, and took the small locket from her hand. The chain had snapped near the clasp. He studied it for a moment, then passed it to one of his men without looking away from Lila. "Fix it," he said quietly. The man nodded and stepped back. Vivian's face had gone pale under her silver mask. Adrian looked from Lila to Nico and back again, his phone now hanging uselessly at his side. Roland let out a nervous laugh. There must be some misunderstanding. The girl had a small accident with the display. My wife was only handling the situation. Nico finally turned his head. Roland stopped talking. "This girl," Nico said, his voice low and clear enough for the whole opera house to hear, "is my sister." The room went still, in a deeper way than before. It was not just silence now. It was the sound of people realizing that the joke had turned into a knife pointed back at them. Lila wiped her cheeks quickly, embarrassed even in her pain. "I told you not to come," she said softly. "I wanted to do this on my own." "I know," Nico said. "And I let you, because you asked me to." His eyes moved over the room then, slow and sharp. "But I did not let them touch you." Lila's chin trembled. "She helped me," she whispered, turning toward Mara. "Mara helped me when nobody else did." For the first time, Nico looked at Mara. It was not the kind of look she was used to. It was not quick, dismissive, or cruel. It did not slide over her body looking for something to mock. It stopped on her face and stayed there. Mara felt herself grow still under it. The fear in her chest shifted into something stranger, something almost like memory. Nico's eyes narrowed a little. Mara looked away first. She did not know why his stare made her heart beat so strangely. Maybe because he looked at her as if he knew her. Maybe because there was a small line between his brows now, like something from long ago had stepped out of the dark and stood in front of him wearing a black worker's dress and worn shoes. Then Mara rubbed her wrist. It was a small nervous habit, one she had carried for years. When she was scared, her thumb found the inside of her wrist, pressing lightly against the place where her pulse lived. She did not know she was doing it until Nico's entire expression changed. He took one step closer. Mara's breath caught. Nico reached beneath the collar of his shirt and pulled out a silver chain. At the end of it hung a small saint medal, old and scratched, the edges worn soft from years of being touched. Aura stared at it. The room disappeared. Rain. The laundromat. Blood on white towels. A stranger's hand closing around her father's medal. Her own voice telling him to sell it if he needed money. The next morning, the accusation, the lost job, the years of people calling her a thief. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Nico's voice was almost a whisper. "Mara." No one in the opera house moved. "You remember," she said. "I remember everything." His hand closed around the medal, but not to hide it, to hold it steady. 7 years ago, near the docks, I was bleeding behind a laundromat while men searched the street to finish what they started. I had no money, no weapon, no name I could safely give. I was nothing but a dying man in the rain. He looked around the room, and his voice grew colder. And this woman, the one you mocked, the one you called trash, dragged me inside and saved my life. Vivian's mouth opened, but no words came. Nico continued, every sentence quiet and heavy. She cleaned my wounds. She hid me from men who would have killed us both. She fed me. She gave me the money she had saved for rent. And when I left, she gave me this. He lifted the medal. Her father's saint. She told me to sell it if I had to. She gave away one of the last things she had, because she believed my life was worth saving, even though she did not know who I was. Mara felt tears burning her eyes, not because she was ashamed, not this time, because someone had finally said the truth out loud. Nico looked at her again, and now there was something dangerous in his calm. Not danger toward her, never toward her. It was the kind of danger that circled a wound and looked for who had made it. "What happened to you after?" he asked. Mara could not answer. Her throat felt too tight. Lila answered for her, voice small but brave. They accused her of stealing. "She lost everything because she kept your secret." Nico closed his eyes for a single moment. When he opened them, the softness was gone. He turned to Roland Caro. "The alliance is over." Roland looked as if the floor had vanished beneath him. "Mr. Moretti, please, let us speak privately. Whatever my wife said, whatever happened here tonight, we can make it right." "No," Nico said, "you cannot." Vivian stepped forward, pride fighting terror across her face. "This is absurd. You cannot destroy a family over a wardrobe assistant." Nico looked at her the way a judge might look at a sentence already signed. "I am not destroying your family over a wardrobe assistant. I am destroying it because you showed me exactly who you are when you thought there would be no cost." He lifted one hand, and one of his men stepped closer with a phone already open. Nico gave orders so softly that the people in the front rows leaned in without meaning to. "Withdraw our protection from every Caro casino. Call the banks holding their quiet debts. Send the documents to every partner who thinks Roland Caro is still stable. Freeze the private club accounts by morning. And get the full security footage from the opera house." Adrian swallowed hard. "You can't use that. I was live streaming. I can delete it." Nico's eyes moved to him. "You already gave the city what it needed." Adrian looked down at his phone as if it had become poison. Nico's man returned with Lila's locket fixed. Nico took it and placed it carefully around his sister's neck. Lila touched it with shaking fingers, crying silently now. Then Nico turned back to Mara. "You received a call," he said. Mara blinked at him. "The hospital," he said. "St. Agnes, your brother." The words broke what little strength she had left. "But Toby needs surgery," she whispered. "Tonight. I don't have enough." Nico's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed gentle. "You do now." Mara shook her head. "No, I can't let you do that. You already did more for me when I had nothing to give back." "That was different." "Yes," Nico said, "it was. You helped a stranger. I am helping the woman who saved my life." He turned slightly. "Call St. Agnes. Pay every balance under Toby Bellamy's name. Move him to the best cardiac team available. If they need anything, they get it. Tonight." One of his men stepped away at once. Mara covered her mouth with her hand. The opera house blurred again, but this time the feeling was not helplessness. It was too much relief coming too fast. It shook her harder than fear. Vivian made a small, desperate sound. "Nico, please, think about what you are doing. The sponsors, the casino contracts, the board. We have built too much to lose it over one mistake." Nico looked at her for a long time. "Cruelty is not a mistake. It is a habit. Tonight you were simply unlucky enough to be recorded." By morning, the videos were everywhere. Adrian had wanted the city to laugh at Mara and Lila. Instead, the city watched Vivian Caro shove a young intern to the floor. They watched wealthy guests step around a crying girl. They watched a hostess in a silver gown mock a poor woman's body while raising money for charity. They watched Mara Bellamy, a wardrobe assistant no one had cared to know, stand between cruelty and someone smaller than herself. People shared the video with anger first, then with awe. Sponsors released careful statements before breakfast. Politicians who had smiled beside Vivienne the night before suddenly claimed they barely knew her. Celebrities deleted photos from the masquerade. Donors asked for their names to be removed from the event page. By noon, the Caro casinos were bleeding money. By evening, reporters had uncovered hidden loans, unpaid workers, quiet lawsuits and partnerships that began to vanish the moment Nico's protection disappeared. Roland Caro tried to call Nico 23 times. Nico did not answer once. Mara did not watch most of it. She spent that night and the days after at St. Agnes, sitting beside Toby's bed while machines breathed and beeped around him. Nico had sent doctors, specialists, paperwork and payments so quickly that the hospital staff suddenly spoke to Mara with a softness she had never heard from them before. No one asked her to step aside. No one asked how she planned to cover the rest. For the first time in years, Mara sat in a hospital chair without doing math in her head. When Toby woke after surgery, pale and weak, but alive, he turned his face toward her and smiled. "You look terrible," he whispered. Mara laughed and cried at the same time. "You scared me half to death." "Did you eat?" She cried harder then, because that was Toby. Even with tubes in his arms and stitches beneath the blankets, he was worried about her. Nico stood outside the room, giving them privacy. Mara could see him through the glass, speaking quietly to a doctor, the silver medal still resting against his chest. He looked like a man no one dared cross, but every time his eyes drifted toward Toby's room, Mara saw the wounded stranger from the rain. Weeks passed, then months. Toby recovered slowly, with the kind of strength that did not look dramatic from the outside, but meant everything to the people who loved him. He learned to walk the hospital halls again, then the stairs at home, then the little block near their apartment where the trees grew crooked through cracked pavement. He gained color in his face. He made jokes with the nurses. He told Mara he wanted to study architecture because hospitals were designed by people who clearly had never had to live in one. Lila left the opera house and began designing costumes under her own name. Not Moretti, not Caro, her own. Nico did not announce her. He did not buy her a career. He simply made sure no one could block the doors she had earned the right to open. Her first collection was small, soft, strange, and beautiful, filled with repaired lace, hand-sewn stars, and hidden pockets for little things people did not want to lose. As for Mara, she never returned to the Bella Vita Opera House as a worker. Nico offered her money. He offered an apartment. He offered to make every hard part of her life disappear with one phone call. Mara accepted help for Toby because pride had no place beside a hospital bed. But for herself, she asked for something different. A small shop, not in a rich part of the city, not behind velvet ropes or guarded doors, just a warm little clothing repair studio on a street where buses sighed at the corner and women carried groceries in tired hands. The sign above the door read, "Bellamy Alterations and Repair," painted in deep blue with a little silver saint near the corner. Mara made the front room bright and welcoming. There were strong chairs with wide seats, a soft couch, mirrors that did not make women feel punished for standing in front of them. She repaired wedding dresses, prom gowns, work pants, winter coats, and old sweaters people could not bear to throw away. She made clothes fit bodies instead of making bodies apologize to clothes. Women came in shy at first, arms crossed over their stomachs, saying things like, "Nothing looks good on me," or "I know I need to lose weight first." Mara would only smile, take out her measuring tape, and say, "You deserve clothes that fit you now." Nico came by often, though never with too many men. He had enough sense to know that a room full of nervous women did not need 6 armed shadows by the door. Sometimes he stood near the window while Mara worked, watching her pin fabric with careful fingers. Sometimes he brought coffee. Sometimes he brought Lila, who always arrived with sketches under one arm, and a story she claimed was not about Nico, but somehow always was. The city still feared him. That never changed. His name still moved through casinos, docks, clubs, and back rooms, where powerful men spoke carefully. But Mara knew another version of him. She knew the man who kept an old saint medal close to his heart, the man who remembered the taste of soup from a laundromat thermos, the man who sat beside Toby during a late appointment because Mara had 3 fittings and refused to cancel on a bride whose mother had just died. One evening after closing, Mara found Nico standing in the shop doorway while rain tapped gently on the glass. The last customer had gone. The sewing machines were quiet. Toby was upstairs doing homework, and Lila had left behind a half-finished sketch on the counter. Nico looked at the little silver saint painted on the sign. "You kept it," he said. Mara followed his gaze. "I lost the real one." "No," Nico said, touching the medal beneath his shirt. "You gave it away." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "For years I thought that night ruined my life." His face darkened with regret. "It should not have cost you anything." "But it did," Mara said softly. "And still, if I found you there again, bleeding in the rain, I think I would do the same thing." Nico stepped closer. "Why?" Mara thought about the opera house, about Lila on the floor, about Toby opening his eyes after surgery, about women standing in her shop and seeing themselves without shame. She thought about Vivian Caro, who had owned rooms full of beautiful things and still had nothing inside her worth saving. She thought about kindness, how small it looked when given, and how far it could travel in the dark before returning. "Because I don't want the world to make me cruel," Mara said. Nico was silent for a moment. Then he took her hand and pressed it gently against the silver medal. It was warm from his skin. "You never were," he said. Outside, the rain softened the city lights until every window looked like it held a secret. Mara stood in her little shop, no longer hidden behind other people's gowns, no longer bowing her head for people who mistook wealth for worth. She was not thin, she was not rich, she was not born into power, but she had saved a life when no one was watching. She had defended a girl when everyone else chose laughter. She had carried love through years of hunger, debt, shame, and fear, and somehow her heart had not hardened. In the end, the world did remember the Bella Vita masquerade, but not for the gowns, or the diamonds, or the powerful guests who had filled the room. It remembered the night a cruel queen lost her throne because she mistook kindness for weakness. It remembered the girl with the broken locket, the Mafia boss who crossed a silent room, and the poor plus-size wardrobe woman who had once given away her last precious thing to save a stranger. And long after the scandal faded, after the Caro name became a warning whispered behind closed doors, Mara Bellamy's little shop stayed open, glowing softly on rainy nights. Women came in carrying torn hems, broken zippers, and quiet hurts. They left standing taller. Because true power was never in the money, the masks, the beauty, or the fear. True power was in what a person chose to do when no one important was looking. Mara had chosen mercy. Years later, mercy found its way back to her, wearing a black suit, carrying an old silver saint, and arriving at the exact moment the world thought she had no one left to call.